order tonight and say welcome to all of you who are here with us for this first meeting in July of the Garner Town Council. This is a regular business meeting, and so tonight, as I call us to order, I want to recognize, I will ask our town clerk to call the roll if she will, please.
Marshburn.
I'm present.
Mayor Pro Tem Vance.
Present.
Councilmember Behringer.
Here.
Councilmember Dellinger.
Here.
And Councilmember Matthews.
Here.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Gibson. So it's my pleasure this time to recognize Mayor Pro Tem Elmo Vance, who will lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance, but also he will be introducing tonight Reverend Dr. Joseph Castell, I believe, who will be leading us in the invocation. Mr. Vance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As the mayor said, I'd like to introduce to everyone the pastor of Garner United Methodist Church, Reverend Dr. Joseph Castile. He will be giving us our invocation on this evening.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Let us pray. Gracious God, we are grateful and thankful to you for all the gifts that you have given to us, the people that you have gifted to be in leadership. We pray for our mayor and council members, all who work for our town, the citizens and all in leadership, that we would be good citizens, that we would be good stewards of what you have given us to care for, and that you would give us good and right spirits as we are about working together as citizens here in Garner. In your holy name we pray.
Thank you very much, sir. And we often or usually try to give pastors who come and share time with us an opportunity to talk a little bit about your fellowship and maybe what's going on there and any special events you'd like to share with us, sir.
I would be glad to do a commercial for Garner UMC. The biggest event that I'm excited about in the next couple weeks is August the 13th, our Back to School Bash from 9 to 12. Part of it will be outside with games and food and events for kids and parents there. And then inside, we will be giving away school supplies. You can go to GarnerNC.gov and get all the information that you need. But please tell your friends, your enemies, whoever might need school supplies to come back to the Back to School Bash on August 13, 9 to 12. Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. And I will just observe that I believe your church has, I guess I'd call it a reputation for the Back to School Bash. I believe it's been going on for quite a number of years, and I've certainly been on your campus on several occasions volunteering over there. So thank you. That's a very needed kind of service, and your church handles it well, I think. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, may I also add that for the pastor, since this is the first time being here, you are free to stay and or depart. It's up to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Vance. Okay, the next item on our agenda always at this meeting is something we call petitions and comments. And so I'll just read to you an instruction that applies to this section. This portion of the meeting is to receive comments from the public on items not included in this agenda. So citizens ideally should sign up with the town clerk to speak prior to the start of the meeting. The council is interested in hearing your concerns, but may not take action or deliberate on subject matter brought up during the petitions and comments segment. Topics requiring further investigation will be referred to the appropriate town officials or staff and may be scheduled for a future agenda. So I will inquire of the town clerk at this time if anyone has signed up in advance of the meeting. Ms. Gibson?
Sure.
Okay. As is usual, the custom, if there are persons here who failed to sign up but you'd like to share in this time of petitions and comments, I would recognize you this time and give you a few brief moments. Is there anyone? Okay. Seeing and hearing none. Okay, thank you. All right, council, the next item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. And so what is your pleasure?
May we adopt the agenda as presented?
Second.
Okay, motion's properly before us and seconded. If you favor the motion, would you please vote aye?
Aye.
Aye.
If there's any opposition, there is none. So thank you, and thanks to all of our staff who helped in preparing this agenda this evening. We do have one presentation this evening, and it's going to be my pleasure to read a proclamation. I'm going to go down to the podium there, and we'll recognize our Parks and Rec director as we do that, and I believe there's a video to be shown in conjunction with this. So give me a moment to walk down here. And I'll see you. Come on up here if you want to. This is our Parks Director, Miss Maria Munoz Blanco. I'm always afraid I'm going to mispronounce your name. So at any rate, so here's the proclamation, and for those of you who may not know, this is month of July is designated as Park and Recreation Month. So, whereas parks and recreation are an integral part of communities throughout this country, including the town of Garner, North Carolina, and whereas parks and recreation promote health and wellness, improving the physical and mental health of people who live near parks. I'm blessed to be one of those, by the way. Whereas parks and recreation promote time spent in nature, which positively impacts mental health by increasing cognitive performance and well-being, and alleviating illnesses such as depression, attention deficit disorders, and Alzheimer's, And whereas parks and recreation encourage physical activities by providing space for popular sports, hiking trails, and many other activities designed to promote active lifestyles. And whereas parks and recreation provide healthy meals, nutrition services, and education, and whereas park and recreation programs and education activities such as out-of-school time programming, youth sports, and environmental education are critical to childhood development. Whereas parks and recreation increase a community's economic prosperity through increased property values, expansion of the local tax base, increased tourism, and the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction, all very important to a town like ours. Whereas parks and recreation are fundamental to the environmental well-being of our community, and whereas parks and recreation are essential and adaptable infrastructure that makes our communities resilient in the face of natural disasters and climate change, and whereas our parks and natural recreation areas ensure the ecological beauty of our community and provide a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. And whereas the U.S. House of Representatives has designated July as Parks and Recreation Month, and whereas the town of Garner recognizes the benefits derived from parks and recreation resources, now therefore be it resolved that the Town Council of Garner, North Carolina, that July is recognized as Park and Recreation Month in the town of Garner, North Carolina. And it's been my great privilege and honor in witness thereof to set my hand and the seal of the great town of Garner, North Carolina, affix this the 5th day of July 2022. And so I want to present this to our Parks and Rec Director, and thank you so much for the good work you do and for all of your staff. I admire greatly, and we'll talk a little bit later about one of the classic events that we put on. So are we to let them do a
Yes, the video. would be
okay
great.
video at this time, and then I'll let you make a few comments?
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, I believe we're going to see a video at this time, so give your attention there, please.
Oh, like this is a great place. You've got wide open fields, you've got little narrow trails, you've got places to walk your dog, play with your dog. The park is great. The playground for kids.
Aesthetically, it's just
beautiful, well maintained.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it is beautiful. He and I would talk a lot when we were going around the track about how the sun is on the lake and how it looks, or the clouds in the sky and how, you know.
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty awesome. Even mountain bikers have trails back there, you know.
Park you can just see all around. So I like the openness of this park.
When I'm not in the fitness challenge, I do like 5 miles per day. And on Saturdays, that's my cheat day. I do 4.
We have gotten up to 2.4. Right now, starting back over, we're just gonna do the 1 and then kind of build back up to it.
I one wheel with my dog here. We do about 4 to 6 miles, depending if we do White Deer Park included or not.
I usually run and walk, and I try to do between 8.5 and 10 miles a day.
Just walking, just coming out here and walking and talking to the Lord when I'm out here.
We do about 4 miles a day, 5 days a week, and so it's good. It's been good.
Try every day. We try to do at least 3 to 2 miles. And my husband and I come back a lot of days and ride bikes here and at White Deer. So yes, it means a lot to us.
But you know, it does more than exercise you physically, spiritually, mentally, as well as physical. The whole body is taken care of. The mind, it just helps you so very, very much.
I have to say before I turn it over to our director that that's the first time I've seen that. And hey, I saw some of my friends up there. These are people I run into at the park, and you meet them while you're out walking and jogging. I saw Ray up there as a retired school principal that I know who walks over there. And in the morning time, I'm not up as early as some of the other folks, but it's a pleasure to see them up there and to know if they haven't seen that, I'll have to tell them they'll have to tune in wherever they can find. And they've made it on our Parks and Rec video. That's great. So at this time, Maria, the podium's yours, and I'll go back to my place. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Mayor, Council, thank you very much for recognizing the amazing work that the team at the Parks and Recreation Department does. 2 of my colleagues are here this evening, Megan Young, who's our Superintendent of Operations, and Martha Engeman, who's our Marketing Coordinator. And I think, as you saw in the video, parks are one of the assets that this community has. Lake Benson's one of our jewel parks, and certainly we know that the people of Garner appreciate and are very sort of frequent users of our parks, which is again is really what drives our department to serve the public. So thank you very much for recognizing us tonight. And this is just the beginning of July, so we have the entire month to celebrate the National Parks and Recreation Month. And the video is a project of Martha and Megan with our communications partners, Rick and Kyle, to really sort of showcase the people who activate our parks. So thank you again for recognizing us tonight. I really appreciate it.
Just before you sit down, I'm going to give our council members an opportunity to make any quick observations they'd like to in regards to this declaration. I'll start with Mr. Matthews over here.
We are blessed to have these parks, and with more coming and with the growth we got coming, it's a big asset. Every time I'm there, like the mayor, meeting somebody you run into, or it's hard to walk around sometimes because you're always talking to somebody, which is a good thing. And I'll plug the Veterans Memorial out there. That was a big add-on to us some years back, and a lot of people go out there and visit that. So the park is well used, and we'll talk about the big event a little bit later, I'm sure. So from the other night. So congratulations on what all went down.
Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Singleton.
Yes, we're blessed with wonderful parks. We have to give credit where credit's due on Lake Benson Park. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, led by our town manager at the time, Peter Bine, did a land swap with the Lutheran church that used to be back here. The town got that property. The town acquired the Buffalo property, which was a hog farm and a strawberry patch, because my brother used to work out there. You should take him out there. And so many people don't realize that, but that's what it was. The house where all those pecan trees are around the Veterans Memorial, that's where the house was, and several barns behind it. And it's our crown jewel is a park. And we're blessed to have it. however many, 12, 14, 15,000 people were there the other night. That talk up Garner and say Garner knows how to do July 3rd and do it right. And they come out every year and appreciate it. And then the folks who were there at 6 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock or whatever out there walking and so forth. My son takes his dog out there quite a bit. So we're blessed to have that. Of many of all our parks are wonderful and amenities. That's just the one that was focused on today. But the big open meadow that was always left was one of the best decisions we ever made because that was debated. And, you know, it started simple. It was just a trail. No restrooms were planned to begin with. Thank God they got added on before they finished doing the first shelter. But I don't know if anyone knows, but the first shelter was made to be twice that big. On the end where the playground is, used to have an awning. And they did half the shelter at once, and they were going to put another end on there, but decided to stay what it was. And we did small shelters, and the medium-sized shelter, and the other 2 small shelters, and the walking trail. And I can remember, and I'll brag about this because this was Gray beating this drum, because I was on the committee that did the master plan, because we had the park and no master plan. That was not very smooth, but anyway, the walking trail got added, and I beat that drum, and I remember folks on the council and the staff, he said, nobody will walk on the trail out there. Finally convinced, they talked me out of getting it paved because I was trying to get it in the budget. The first trail was not paved, but we had issues, parents pushing strollers. That didn't work very well. We got it paved, and look how many people use that. So that was a lot of years ago, but we're blessed to have the parks, and our public works folks do a great job maintaining it. So let's give credit to them too, because our parks are, all our facilities are well maintained. Town hall, police, everywhere. So it's a blessing. That's a very nice video. Thumbs up, 2 thumbs up.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Behringer, comments?
Ray used his time and my time, but I'm going to take privilege anyway. I remember that strawberry patch out there because I remember picking strawberries there, and I didn't live in Garner when I did that. But this was the place to come to get the strawberries, and so lots of good memories from that, but also to see what it has become today is just absolutely incredible. I can't say that my children played there, but my grandchildren do and love it, and they come from about 10, 12 miles away to come to Lake Benson Park and White Deer Park. And recently, my thing that catches my eye the most, I just absolutely love, is that van that's parked out there. What does it says? The Wreck Rocks or the Rock and Wreck or something like that. I love the van. But we have an excellent park system and excellent management. We thank you for everything that you all do to make it that way.
Okay, Mr. Tellinger, anything?
I'll just say good video, and you know, the parks that we have set a high bar for what people in Garner expect, and I'm proud of the work this council, since I've been on it, has not because I've been on it, but since I was on it. Y'all know what I mean. You know what I mean. In acquiring additional property for that future, and there's a strong legacy of supporting our parks, and Mr. Singleton mentioned himself pushing through this idea of nature recreation and getting out and preserving that, and so I'm looking forward to what we're doing and going forward with that.
Thanks.
Yes, Marie, I would say that Garner is known for its parks, and your hard work is appreciated. And parks are definitely an integral part of the community. They're accessible from various communities. If you don't stay close, very close to one, then there's one that's not too far away that you can get to and have access to. And I know that you have your hands filled with the other 2 locations for parks to come. So we're looking forward to more of the great work in the future. Great job.
Okay, any closing comments? Or thank you for being here this evening, taking your time to come out.
Thank you for the legacy of this council in the past and your continued support for Parks and Recreation in Garner. It's very appreciated.
Okay, well done. Let's give her a round of applause. Okay, moving along, the next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. There are 4 items on the consent agenda, and usually ask the council to approve those. I am generally aware that a council member, I believe, desires to maybe pull one item from the consent agenda and move it over to the regular agenda for some further discussion. Am I right on that, Mr. Dellinger?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. Mayor and Council, I'd like to pull the street stub completion policy from the consent agenda and place it on the main agenda.
Okay, we could put that after one of the numbered ones are on there. Maybe after item, I'm thinking after item 3 or 2. Would that be okay?
Yeah, we'll do it after item 2.
After item 2, okay. Is that okay with council? So, council, I will ask you to vote on that since that's an amendment to the consent agenda. But so I believe Mr. Dellinger has spoken his request in the form of a motion. Is there a second?
Second, and then also in that motion, can we roll in approving items 1, 2, and 4 at the same time?
I think so, yeah. Yes, okay.
Second.
That'd be part of the motion, exactly. Item 3 will come after we said item 2 on the main agenda. Okay, if you favor the motion, please vote aye.
Aye.
If you're opposed, vote no, and there is no opposition. Okay, thank you very much. So, we do not have any public hearings scheduled this evening, so we will commence with new and old business. And I will recognize our town engineer, Mr. Chris Johnson, who will lead us through the first item, Lake Drive improvements. Welcome, sir.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As you may know, we have recently advertised the Lake Drive Improvements Project, and this item is to talk to you about the results of the bid and steps moving forward. So a brief agenda is to just give a brief overview for the people watching from home. I know you're very familiar with this project, but then touch upon the summary of the bids that we received. Also talk reminder about the interlocal agreement that we have on this project with the City of Raleigh, and then talk about next steps and the final recommendation. So the main project is to widen Lake Drive. There's 2 blocks on this street. One block is kind of unfinished, so it's to widen that portion of the street to 12 lanes with curb and gutter. As you know, the NCDOT is planning to do a bridge replacement project, which will close the access from Hilltop Avenue onto the 70 on-ramp, and so we're widening what will become the prime ingress and egress movements to this small subdivision. So we'll be replacing the existing shoulder swell system with an underground storm drainage pipe network, and we'll be installing sidewalk along the north side of the street, as well as we've got an interlocal agreement with Raleigh to replace an old 6-inch asbestos water line in the water services with ductile iron pipe. So just a brief map to kind of show the limits. As you can see, we're first block moving west to east. NC50's over on the right side of your page over here. And we've got Dulles Circle, which is a loop cul-de-sac at the end. And Hilltop Avenue, like I said, comes out to 70. That will eventually become closed when the bridge replacement project gets completed. So we are basically resurfacing the first block mostly, and then installing the sidewalk. And then on the second block between Hilltop and 50, we'll be widening mostly along the south side of the road, but installing curb and gutter, and then again sidewalk on the north side. So just a summary of the bids. We received 3 bids, opened them on June 23rd. Daniels Incorporated of Garner, Fred Smith Company, and Carolina Sunrock were the 3 bids we received, with Daniels Incorporated of Garner having the low bid in the amount of $822,849.65, which the engineer's estimate was around $780,000. So they were the low bidder. Their low bid was approximately 5.5% higher than the engineer's estimate. Daniels is planning to use 39.7% in minority and women-owned business subcontract participation on the project. Staff will, as usual with these construction projects, recommends a budget contingency for unforeseen conditions that we may encounter. So that would put the total construction budget at $905,134.62. And then, as I mentioned, we do have an interlocal agreement that was previously executed with Raleigh back in April 2021. It's to replace the 6-inch asbestos water line that's sort of, they would rather get that replaced before we redo the road so they don't have to come back in later since it is nearing its life expectancy. The original agreement had a maximum reimbursement of $234,411. That was back in April 2021. It was based on a preliminary design at the time, not a final design. And of course, that preceded some of the cost escalation we've seen over the past year. So we do intend to work with Raleigh Water to revise the ILA and align it with the bid quantities and the contractor pricing that we have now obtained. So we have estimated that new maximum reimbursement to be around $327,828, and that is currently pending Raleigh's concurrence. So we will continue to work with them, and then the final reimbursement will be based on actual final quantities following construction completion, which may be below that, could become higher than that, but that would be the maximum reimbursement that they would provide unless the ILA was revised again at a later date. So the next steps would be for us to revise and execute that ILA with the City of Raleigh, and then execute a contract with Daniels Inc. of Garner. We would need to determine a notice to proceed. We are experiencing some supply chain issues in the construction industry. We had the same thing happen on Vandora Springs in the spring, where we had to push it back a couple months. We are working with Daniels and have been let known that they are experiencing some issues with some water and storm pipe. So we'll continue to work with them and get some more detailed information and come to a fair and reasonable start date once we figure that out. But it is a 4-month from notice to proceed to completion. So we're expecting some type of start either late summer or early fall of this year, which would put the completion sometime early to next year. We're just showing spring of 2023, but we will tie that down once we have more information. So our final recommendation is for you to consider award of the Lake Drive project to Daniels Inc. of Garner and authorize the town manager to execute a contract with Daniels Inc. For an initial cost not to exceed $822,849.65 plus approval of that 10% budget contingency. And then we will also be moving forward with bringing you that revised interlocal agreement when we've got concurrence from Raleigh. Hopefully, maybe by the next meeting. All I have.
Okay, thank you, sir. So I'll recognize council for any questions, comments, and start with Mr. Vance to my right.
I have no questions in reference to this project, but we also have the bridge project that'll be starting in around September timeframes.
I believe that's when the award is. I'm not sure when it actually will start.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, I have no questions.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Dellinger.
No questions.
Okay, Ms. Behringer. Okay, Mr. Singleton.
It's moving forward. I know it's taking some time, but it's good to see the project moving forward.
Okay, and Mr. Matthews.
It's good that Daniels is a local company. They've done a lot of work I've seen over the past months and years, and they seem to do a good job. So, and it's
They've worked on several resurfacing contracts. This will be the first time we've worked with them outside of that, but yes. And they've got the subcontractors that they're using. I've got experience with them in the past as well.
Good company.
Okay, anything else from council? I believe we're asked to consider approval of the master agreement. Excuse me, reading from the wrong page here, I guess. Action is to approve the contract with Daniel, right? Okay.
And then to authorize the manager to execute a contract
That's
along
right,
with that
yeah.
budget contingency.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion properly made and seconded. All council who favor the motion, would you vote aye?
Aye.
And it is unanimous. So, Mr. Johnson, we'll look forward to that work moving forward and maybe periodic updates on that from time to time. Okay, are you handling the next matter, or is that, no, that's Miss...
Just teeing it up.
Okay. Leah Harrison. Welcome, Ms. Harrison. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Okay, we'll hear from you now.
All right, so I'm here to talk to you today about the two parts to one thing. The Pearl and Parker Street Improvements Project, which is one of the street and sidewalk projects that we had identified as a priority when we did the on-call contract last year. And then along with that, the on-call master agreement with the consultant to do that project. So we did two similar presentations for you to this at the end of last year when we started the first two of those projects. So this will be a similar type of request. Just a brief agenda, just review the request for qualifications that we did when we selected those consultants last year. Talk about the on-call master agreement with Kimley Horn and Associates that we would like to execute. The Pearl and Parker Street Improvements Project that would be part of statement of work number 1. And then our staff recommendations. So last year in April, we advertised a request for qualifications for professional services for an on-call street and sidewalk designers. We received 19 proposals from that request for qualifications. We reviewed all of those proposals with a review team from engineering and planning. And we selected 3 firms, RK&K, SEPI, and Kimley Horn. RK&K and SEPI we have already executed an on-call master agreement with, and they are currently working on projects for us. And Kimley Horn is the last one for us to start working with of that list. The on-call master agreement is a master agreement for professional engineering services. It has an initial 3-year term with an option to extend up to 2 additional years. This is a very general master agreement, and then the specifics of each project that they work on will be outlined in the statement of work for each task that we authorize them to do, including the compensation and scope of services for each task. Pearl Street and Parker Street Improvement Project is one that I'm sure you are all very familiar with right downtown. This will include improvements to the west side of Pearl Street along the frontage of the Garner Depot Museum and the baseball complex, basically from Main Street down to the terminus of Pearl Street at the south. And then as well as along Parker Street, and that will be both sides of Parker Street from Montague to where improvements that are being done by private development will end. Currently, there is a townhome project that will be in this area here, and then this area here as well. So as part of that project, they will be improving the east side of Pearl Street as a requirement of their development, and they will be improving both sides of Parker Street for that short stretch from where our project ends to Pearl Street. So we will basically complete what they are doing to build out the remainder of those streets. That will include widening of the street as well as sidewalk installation along both of those stretches. Statement of work number 1 with Kimley Horn for this project includes all the basic services for design of the street and sidewalk project, including topographic surveys, roadway widening and sidewalk design, storm drainage, street lighting plans, traffic control plans, erosion control. It will include public involvement, utility coordination, any necessary permitting such as erosion control permits, right-of-way and acquisition exhibits, and then final plans, construction estimate, and bid documents to bid the construction of the project. The design contract for this project with Kimley Horn is a not-to-exceed amount of $191,726.35. I tried to give them an extra cent there. And the time of performance is to be complete by December 31st, 2023. They have indicated they expect approximately a 12-month design time frame, so it could be a little sooner, but just given the nature of the way these things go, that's our set completion in the contract. So our recommendation tonight is to consider approval of the on-call master agreement with Kimley Horn and Associates, statement of work number 1 for Pearl and Parker Street improvements projects, and authorize the town manager to execute the master agreement and statement of work number 1 in an amount not to exceed $191,726.35.
Okay, yes, thank you, Leah. Thank you for your presentation. pretty involved. A lot of money to spend, right?
It's always more money than you expect.
All right. Okay, I'll recognize maybe starting with Ms. Behringer if she has any questions or comments. Okay, go back to Mr. Singleton.
Yes, Mr. Harrison. So we're going to be doing the west side and some part of Parker, but the developer's going to be doing the east side and the other part of Parker. Are we going to try to coordinate and do all this at once? Because who's responsible for putting the asphalt down? I mean, if we're putting asphalt down on the road and then we're going to have a construction project coming on top of it, is that wise to do? I mean, shouldn't whoever the final repaving do be last? I don't know if that's us or if that's them.
Right. I think it'll probably depend on who gets there first, but we will definitely coordinate with them as we go. I think originally there was a thought to do this together and do like a public-private partnership with that development, and it just wasn't something that worked out for the developer. They're able to usually move a lot more quickly than we do, so it's likely that they will probably do their portion first, and then we will be finishing our portion after that.
And who's going to resurface the whole road? Is that our responsibility or theirs? Or are we just widening the road to where the curb and gutter goes, and we're not resurfacing both streets while we're there?
If it was the part that was newly constructed, if they finish before us, I don't think that we would go back and resurface the entire road. We will pick up where they left off and complete the other part.
Okay, Phil?
Well, I'd see this thing moving forward. Wrote the other day, and they've taken down all those houses right across from the depots. That was a positive, and be glad to see this project. I think it's going to really jumpstart that whole area over there.
Okay, Ms. Behringer? Mr. Dellinger?
The questions, I do have kind of similar thoughts around the coordinating and being more cost effective to do it all at once as opposed to somebody getting started early and maybe ending up in somebody's way, especially when you're talking about gutters. And any way to coordinate or timing better, we should look into it. I don't know if it makes. They change developers at some point, is that correct?
I believe so. Mm-hmm.
Do we know where they are on their timeline or not?
I know that they have permit approval from us. We have approved their construction drawings, so can start on infrastructure at this point as far as the town's concerned, unless they have anything else outstanding. But I believe they have City of Raleigh approval and the town's approval. But beyond that, I'm not sure what their timeline looks like.
One thing to add is to keep in mind that while the developer has no acquisition that they have to really deal with, they are able to do all of their work without along the frontages of their property, while the town will be working with multiple entities and that is a time-consuming process that they will not have to deal with. So that's why we will more than likely be lagging behind them schedule-wise, and that's just the way it is with doing public work versus private work. So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Mr. Vance?
No questions.
Okay. Believe that's all. Everybody's had a chance to question, so thank you very much. The recommendation and the motion is before council at this time. Motion would be in order.
May I move that the master agreement and scope of work number 1 with Kimberly Horn and Associates and authorize the town manager to execute the contracts in the amount not to exceed $191,726.35.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Motion properly made and seconded. Unless there's any further question or discussion on the part of council, I'll ask for your vote. So if you favor this motion, would you vote aye?
Aye.
Aye.
If there's opposition, no. And there is none. So it's approved. Thank you very much. All right. Let me see. I believe I put the street stub next, or was council expecting that to come after item 3? Now? Yeah, okay. All right. So we will now go to what had been, I believe it's item 3 on the consent agenda. Let me see if, yeah. And we pulled that from the consent agenda at the request of Mr. Dellinger, and I will recognize him at this time for questions and comments that the council can join in discussing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I pulled this evening. It was in the consent agenda. We've done a lot of work on the council side on and wrestled with stub completions and connections with older neighborhoods. And so I'm appreciative of the work that staff and I think the Public Works Committee has done in putting the policy together. And in reading through it over the weekend, there are 3 sort of exemption categories that were proposed. One was related to excessive traffic creation. The other was environmental considerations regarding floodplains and Neuse River buffers and the cost effectiveness of making those connections. The other was redundancy related to 2 stubs and it being unnecessary to connect both. In just the creation of the policy, one of the things I wanted to preserve a little bit of is the good work the council's done in having access from both the applicant and the citizens with regards to scenarios and situations that may not be covered by the policy and making sure there's adequate recourse for them. Again, I think we've done a good job in taking into account a lot of the really unique circumstances of each of them. And so my recommendation to the council is to add a 4th exemption category that would read thusly. Number 4, council exemptions and recommendations. The town council may also issue a waiver for stub completion citing safety, quality of life, or other circumstances related to public interest and/or evaluate and recommend appropriate traffic calming measures. And that's the totality of the recommendation, keeping in mind that we can't make anyone do the traffic calming, but we've done a good job, I think, on some of these that have come before us in listening, balancing those concerns with those of the applicants to maintain safety in some of these smaller or older neighborhoods. They may not be smaller, but they're older. That's my recommendation. I'll leave it to
All right,
council for
all right.
discussion.
Council, give you an opportunity to talk with Mr. Dellinger about this or ask questions or make comments.
Has the, Mr. Triesenberg, have you guys looked at this and have any comments on it? Jeff? Caught you off guard. Cramping your foot, that's how it is when you get old.
Yes, I had a chance to talk with Mr. Dellinger just briefly before the meeting. And I think my only real concern is that I know he's trying to set some parameters for it. It's just that the parameters don't, I'm worried that they would put us back to where we were. So I don't know, though, if that's necessarily the case, but that is my one fear, is that if right now it's kind of up in the air now. So that's really my only concern. I mean, ultimately, whatever, y'all recommend, but I just don't want to go through the effort of trying to give parameters only to give everybody out, which is basically just, and I think that's what we as staff feel like is the current situation. And that give either the community or the developers any clear guidance up front. So I don't know. It's it's tough when I hear safety and quality of life. Not sure how we define those.
Yeah, and with the policy, I think the policy is good, and there are a lot of parameters, and there are some hard numbers, but even in the traffic component, when it's vehicles per day, and it's maximum of 750 based on a sealed traffic impact analysis, that may be good now, but does that withstand the test of time, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, when more development comes in? And just because there's a number there that it met and triggers, oh, it's going to be fine. Well, if you look in the totality, which I think we've done a good job as council of doing, and saying, well, there are a lot of big open tracts of land around, and there's probably going to be development there, and this is really going to become a cut through. And like I said, I think the policy is very good. I think it creates a lot of concrete measures and, kind of milestones for people to hit to help you give them guidance on yes or no. But the variability of situations can't be captured in one policy. And my concern on sort of the flip side of yours is I don't want people to not have recourse, whether they're an applicant or they're the public, by just saying, well, that's the policy, I can't do anything about it. And then if it comes to council, then we have to potentially go against our own policy that we adopted and then revise the policy on the fly or make an exception when there aren't really conditions set forth for exceptions in the policy. So that I want to leave the voice there for very unique situations, but give you the latitude on the parameters you have in the policy to give some pretty firm guidance on. And we defer to, I think, the planning department a lot, and we trusted your judgment on a lot of things when it comes to the connectivity and the numbers. And so if a situation came up, again, we would only be able to issue a waiver. We wouldn't force a connection. So that's sort of, that was my thought process on that.
Okay, I'll recognize Mr. Vance for any questions or comments.
I'll just hold for right now, Mr. Mayor. I'm
Okay.
thinking through it.
Mr. Singleton?
I had no trouble with that. In addition, now, if the staff maybe wants to change a word or two, or make a suggestion to a change or tweaking what Mr. Dellinger has, a recommended addition to be clear about this or clarify the position stated, then that's fine. But the thought process, I have no trouble with what he's proposing.
Can you say the last piece again, please? The thought process?
Thought process, I have no problem with what he's proposing, but if the language needs to be stated in a different way that staff feels better, that's fine with me. If they need to tweak a word or change 2 words or whatever.
Okay, I'm going to recognize the town manager.
Are there any extra copies of that? So I can take a look at it, or?
Here you go. I believe we do have
Some relevant
a
staff.
few extra
3 or 4
copies. Yeah, okay. And, okay. While you're doing that, I will recognize Ms. Behringer for any comments, questions.
Question of the town attorney, is this something that you should weigh in on or can't?
It's essentially a policy, so you can adopt that policy. I just saw this language, about an hour ago, briefly. My sense would be you've gotten 3 somewhat objective type standards, not completely objective, and then you're adding in a very subjective standard. So as Mr. Triesenberg said, that kind of creates an opportunity for anyone to argue safety, quality of life that don't have measurable standards. Not that the other 3 have completely measurable standards. The environmental one has some subjectivity and cost, what is cost prohibitive for one project that's not for another. My sense is that if you did get an unusual different circumstance, there would be a request to amend the policy to address that circumstance, which could be done in the future. But as a policy, this is a testing ground for how this works before you would adopt and part of the UDO to make this a more formal regulation, which then you would not have the flexibility necessarily to adjust unless they could meet the standards that are outlined.
Okay, let's see, who did I miss?
A question to council, or to council, based upon what we have here, would it require more thought on our part before making this a policy from the terminology that's being used, the subjectivity of the policy, public interest, and seeing how those can be fleshed out, possibly?
I'm sorry, are you asking to about adopting the entire policy or this amendment and this addition?
I'm really asking, does it need to be further looked at before being adopted to flesh out so that it makes sense and sort of makes, I hate to say makes sense, but so that it is not in conflict with what we currently have and create any problems, so that it'll be a smoother flow with what we currently have in place.
Right. As I understand, the original intention of the policy was to create some parameters and standards so that there would be something that staff could use to talk to both the neighboring communities and to developers or applicants. With or without Mr. Dellinger's language, this policy would provide guidance to both sets. And as I stated earlier, if there's a circumstance that hasn't been thought of, it's likely that will come back to council as an amendment to this policy. Given that the site plan subdivision process takes a long time, there's times to address that kind of unusual situation. But my guess is with the if they can't meet one of those 3 exemption standards, there'll be an argument that there's an impact to, safety, quality of life, or other circumstances related to public interest. That's very broad, and most people could find an argument for or against something within that. So, if the intended desire was to create some kind of framework for the community and the developers, I think the existing policy does that. This adds another category of flexibility. But will this exception swallow the whole is the concern.
In thinking about the process, there's a bias, and that's not using it in a loaded way. There's a bias towards connectivity already built into the UDO and a bias built into the policy, which is fine. And then there are a couple of exception categories. The purpose of this is to address situations that aren't covered by the other exemption categories. And somebody could make the argument, but I think we've had those discussions in council on each of these individual circumstances and evaluated them on, and I think quality of life, what we're talking about is cut through traffic and beyond simple numbers in quality of life and that change of an expectation of traffic where you can walk and then all of a sudden it's unsafe. So it wouldn't be a matter of, they make the argument that this is a quality of life and we just say, yeah, that has to be it. We're still lean heavily on the planning department for the harder numbers, the safety concerns, the connectivity related to the transportation plan. Again, it just creates the forum for recourse for an applicant or the community, whereas the policy as it stands now, it's binary. It's yes or no, and while it may be an opportunity for someone to push for an amendment to the policy, that's a much higher threshold for an applicant or a citizen on a one-off basis to achieve, to be heard, and us to not ever know that they sort of had a legitimate argument for requesting a waiver or traffic calming and that sort of thing. So that was, the point is give another place and time for council as representative of citizens and applicants to be heard and say, I don't fit this mold and I would like to be heard.
So, I mean, what I'm hearing is possibly the opportunity to consider Mr. Dellinger's recommendation here and perhaps vote on that tonight, and/or the possibility that, without wanting to put a lot of extra work on staff, to take the recommended action and ask staff to maybe rework the wording to some extent and bring that back to this council. I don't know if that would expedite our time here a little better, but I'll also be sensitive to whether or not Mr. Dellinger feels like that the wording he's put before us this evening is suitable for the council to agree on or not, and then it would be incorporated. Is that correct?
It's recommended language. If there are modifications, I'm open to modifications within the spirit of the intent, so.
Give staff an opportunity to respond. Is there a way to?
If it doesn't give you all any heartburn, I wouldn't mind, just be able to sit down with engineering folks for a few days and see if we can't kind of respond and just go back and forth with some ideas. And I don't think it takes more than a week and have it come back on
The next agenda. To me, that's a reasonable way to deal with the matter at hand right now, and bring it back and see if that wording maybe clarifies a couple of things and still accomplishes the same purpose. Okay, council good with that? Okay, Jeff, thank you very much then. So we will hear back from planning when you're ready, probably the next meeting, right? Thanks, sir. So the next item is item 3 on the agenda. And Mr. Triesenberg, this is the text amendment, ZTA 2201 Unified Development Ordinance. A lengthy document, right?
Yes, just, but not as lengthy as it was.
Yeah, okay. We'll recognize you, sir.
So, yes, formally, good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Good to be with you tonight at what we hope might be the conclusion, at least of this first round, to rewrite the UDO. Again, I'll state very clearly up front, if that does happen, we totally expect to be making probably some additional corrections and little tweaks in the year and two to come ahead. So by no means do we expect it to be absolutely perfect, but we certainly tried to work out as many of these kinks as we could as we delve through it. But it has been, both the text amendment and the corresponding map amendment have been to the Planning Commission. They spent a couple of months taking a look at it and have given their unanimous recommendation. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time tonight going over what's been previously presented. Just going to focus primarily on things that have changed since the public hearing. I do want to at least give some screen time for the public to the map amendments in particular, because there are several of those that we did go through. So again, just a reminder. See it at this size and it looks like full screen. There we go. Just a reminder that there have been 2 phases to this process, and phase 1 was complete with the adoption of the amendments that implemented the state statutory requirements of Article 160D, and this is now phase 2, which is the complete rewrite. And again, want to just highlight this one more time. The engagement, we did have 12 focus group interviews. There were 5 joint council planning commission meetings, 3 public workshops, 15 meetings of the steering committee, and 3 meetings of the planning commission. So a lot of time and effort from various interested parties. So moving into the text amendment first. The major changes, you do have a complete strike-through version that was in your packets or linkable in your packets that documented each and every change, no matter how small or how big, since the public hearing. But basically there were three or four here main change areas. So the first was in Article 6, where we did introduce specific regulations where accessory dwelling units might be considered, and they must have extra acreage. So for example, in the new R4, typically that's 0.25 acres per dwelling unit, and so for 2 normal-sized units, it would be 0.5 acres. So it's not quite the full, you need an additional 0.13 to get an accessory dwelling unit in R4. For R2, you actually need an additional 0.38 because there you need at least a half an acre for each dwelling unit. The 0.88 would be 0.5 for the primary dwelling unit and then 0.38 acres for the accessory. In that initial draft, we did have the resident ownership standard. There has been, in that intervening time, some additional case law that has come down with the state court system, and in talking with the town attorney, we have now been advised that that is not a condition or a criteria that we can require, as it would not be compliant likely with state law. So we talked about this at the Planning Commission. Planning Commission still felt that the concept of accessory dwelling units was worth pursuing and that the opportunity for them is quite narrow. For example, we did look at the Greenbrier community. There were some questions there, particularly because the original zoning showed that being R4. We've now changed that to R2. We did a canvas of the neighborhood to see which lots might be that 0.88 acres or higher, and out of the 329 residential lots in the neighborhood, there were 4. So that's pretty narrow, and then somebody has to be interested in doing it. So again, after all that was said and done, Planning Commission still felt that it was worth pursuing, in the hopes that maybe some folks will try it, but not feeling like the door was wide open, and that is something that we can monitor to see how it goes. And if for some reason, we find that it's leading to something in those first few cases that isn't desirable, we can go back and, close that door if necessary. In Article 9, which is the site, building design, and parking, there was introduced limits on mass grading. The Planning Commission did ask Stuart to go back and look at that, and Jay McLeod, is here with us again tonight, so he's here in the audience to answer any questions. They went back and took a look at some of the practical challenges that some of the Planning Commission members brought up. So we did substitute some new language related to the mass grading. At least one member of the Planning Commission thought that it still might be a little too restrictive, but I think staff agreed with, more so with the rest of the Planning Commission, in that it's probably better to clamp down a little harder and then loosen things up if need be. We're not setting the bar so low that we're still having these huge swaths at one time graded. And I think we set the new upper threshold at is either 20 20 acres. There's some exceptions to that, but trying to keep things in phases at 20 acres or less being cleared at any one time. Article 11, you would have seen a lot of changes there. Nothing really substantive. It just so happened that Ms. Harrison, our assistant town engineer, has been working with the state to review our existing floodplain ordinance, and we have new FEMA flood maps that are getting ready to become effective next month. And they're wanting to be sure that everybody's floodplain ordinances in particular are up to snuff. And so that chapter and that section of Article 11 had been through extensive review with the state environmental folks. They put back their comments to us, and so what you see in Article 11 is just those being duplicated into the UDO because that happens to be where our floodplain ordinance lives. And then in Article 12, signage, the most significant change there, and I alluded a little bit to this in the public hearing, was our struggle with kind of these small signs that you push into the ground, the little step-in stake signs. Originally, we had thought about setting a limit of 2 of those per lot at any one time. I did a little additional canvassing around the state to see if anybody had any kind of unique approaches to that, because particularly I was worried about during election season. Folks quite often want to put out 2 or 3, but do we want to allow 2, 3, 4 just any time of year? So one of the communities had actually put in a kind of a suspension of the rules clause during election season. So the town attorney reviewed that with me, and we felt comfortable with actually them being able to go down to just 1 per lot year-round. So if somebody has their house for sale, or if they're going to have a garage sale, or they just want to have a sign to express an opinion on something, there is that allowance for 1 on a lot year-round. But then those rules get suspended just during that election time frame, and we structured those so they're comparable with current state law, so it's a few weeks beforehand and then so many days after. All in all, we felt comfortable with that from a staff level. Easy to enforce and not too complex. So in terms of the consistency of the request for tonight, again, on a 7-0 vote, the Planning Commission did unanimously forward the following statement regarding consistency to the council. And just to read this into the record, their statement is that this request to amend and replace the UDO in full is consistent with the Garner Forward Comprehensive Plan in that it directly addresses several plan recommendations, including the introduction of form-based regulations that will help improve design outcomes, the revision of parking requirements, the revision of landscaping and tree preservation requirements, the strengthening of access management rules, the implementation of a connectivity standard, and the adoption of rules that support complete streets, and that over time, the adoption of these recommendations will encourage housing, community character, transportation systems, recreation opportunities, and commerce that put renewed focus on the town's existing centers, creates a vibrant community, builds on the existing character, improves value, recognizes and supports shifting trends in work and employment, connects us physically, grows the role and opportunities for transit, minimizes increases in congestion, and celebrates the uniqueness of Garner that sets it apart from neighboring communities. So staff does support ZTA 2201 as proposed for amendment by the Planning Commission. We are recommending Town Council approval of that statement of consistency and further recommending approval of the text amendment request as a reasonable one. We do have motion worksheets on page 90 and 91 for the text amendment. When we do get to that, we do ask for the text amendment vote first because the text has to be on the books in order to adopt the zoning. But if it's okay with you, I'll proceed also then to the zoning portion. This
Yeah, I
is
think
our
that-
final draft map, and we have posted that online. I know it doesn't look like, looks like a very large and complex map at that scale, but there it is. And then here are our modified staff recommendations that I did want to give some screen time to. Again, these are all just the result of us looking at basically the map parcel by parcel and making sure that we were being as consistent as we could from existing zoning to proposed. So here, the Spring Drive, which is the site of the townhome subdivision, that was denied. The current zoning is O&I conditional. The recommendation is neighborhood commercial. Wilmington Road, this is a result of a recent rezoning, why this one is being changed to reflect the multifamily project that was approved. So this is going from, again, MF1 to MF1. Patty Road South was another rezoning recently. So it was rezoned to SB conditional. So now we have it as CMU, conditional mixed use conditional. West Garner Road, the site of the Buffalo Townhomes project, that was rezoned to the MF1. And again, we are recommending, actually, should say we have settled on MFA and MFB to provide some distinction between the old and the new multifamily, so this would actually be MFA. Here on 10-619-1010 Road, we had a mobile home overlay district that got by us. So that has now been corrected, so this will be R2 with the mobile home floating overlay district. Over in Greenfield, again, we have the old MXD, that old mixed use district that goes back to the 90s. Breaking that down now into its relative components. So most of Greenfield you will see we have either allocated to light industrial or commercial mixed use. This happens to be the behavioral hospital, so that's not an industrial use, so CMU is what we defaulted to. The same with the United Methodist Church North Carolina Conference headquarters off of Waterfield Ridge, same thing. Waterfield Ridge Apartments, rather than introduce multifamily into this area and having it kind of stick out like a sore thumb, multifamily, certain types of multifamily would be allowable in the commercial mixed use district, and the type that was approved for this site would fit. So again, rather than introducing an MF district, going with the CMU. Down at McCullers, current zoning is service business. Again, some of this was routed to initially neighborhood commercial, didn't really fit. So conditional mixed use or commercial mixed use. You can see that creates a nice kind of solid, consistent zoning pattern in that area. This was a split parcel, actually had one parcel with two designations. This was remapped by the owners not long ago, and so what you see highlighted there is all floodplain. They chose to separate out the floodplain from the buildable areas. So part of it was already kind of a non-buildable or very special, but we recommended RA, given that it is under a conservation easement as well. Timber Crossing Shopping Center, again, this is one of those that got caught up in the neighborhood commercial idea, but really it needed to be commercial mixed use for the intensity. Same with the Home Depot site at Garner Town Square. The Greenbrier, again, we had split zoning on the parcel. Some of it is SB conditional. Actually, some of it is also the R15, settling on neighborhood commercial. Technical Court has a service business conditional district that, though it's really conditioned down to be more of an industrial type setting. And looking at the uses and how the property is set up, light industrial actually seemed to be a better fit rather than neighborhood. (1336) West Garner Road behind Angie's. Again, largely commercial mixed use already. The spot there in the middle was actually service business. More intense neighborhood commercial was not going to fit that. And then the same across the road, 1343. So again, creating kind of that node of commercial mixed use at the intersection. Weston and West Garner, we have the service station there. Again, one of those that the service business initially went to neighborhood commercial, but really needed to go to commercial mixed use for the intensity. Hudson's Hardware was another one of those. Just a reminder that in all of these that were already conditional, the conditions carry over. So they will still be limiting those sites as they were to begin with. Buffer of Beacon Commerce Park there at Calabar Street. Again, one of those service business translation issues. Bryan Road, again, a service business translation. Now to commercial. Here on the corner of Auburn, Knightdale, and East Garner, this was an oversight due to the recent rezoning to neighborhood office, so that becomes neighborhood commercial, not R2. Fayetteville Road, just north of Swift Creek, currently service business. The draft was actually for heavy industrial. That seemed to be, for a site that was not developed, that was probably giving it a good up zone. So commercial mixed use. This was the zoning probably most recently for the townhomes on Timber Drive. Again, rather than, this was zoned to O and I. And again, to allow the townhomes, but to be conditioned down to townhomes, commercial mixed use was the district to enable that to happen under the new ordinance and have the height allowance that was granted in the current O and I. But consistent with the zoning to the east. Another rezoning recently off of Clifford Road. So currently was recently rezoned to R9, so that goes to R4, just like the neighborhoods around it. Our overall recommendation, all R15 districts, we looked at each one of these in depth and did not find a reason to flip anybody differently. So all of the existing R15, rather than going to R4, will go to R2. So that includes Heather Park, Sutton Springs, Tiffany Woods, Greenbrier, Breezeway, half of Cloverdale. So Cloverdale will no longer have split zoning under this proposal, and a few other places. Camelot. The 601 Tryon Apartments was rezoned recently to MF2 conditional. And it was thought that hopefully all of the current MF1, MF2s would all fit into the new MFA, but some of them actually have buildings that require the new MFB, which does allow for taller buildings. Elevate at White Oak was one that did not employ in its approval anything over 3 stories in height. So that one actually was able to go to the new MF1 or MFA. Reserve at White Oak, same as the Waterfield Ridge Apartments, is part of that MXD district rather than introducing the MF. Conditional or commercial mixed use is workable and fits the overall pattern in the area. Lennox Place, again, a existing complex that's limited to 3 stories, fits within the MF1 / MFA. Grand Village Apartments did have some 4-story buildings, so there it was more appropriate to have the MF2, MFB. Then we did have a few requests that are not being recommended, just want to re-highlight those. We did have a request from 5872 Jones Sausage Road. We did note that that would be an upzoning for that parcel and encourage the applicant to come in and speak with us individually about that particular parcel. The Pine Winds Apartments, there was a concern about the height allowances there. We did tweak the text in the MF1, MFA district to allow for some additional height with additional setback, so that no longer was a concern. And the Yergin Property E-District site, again, currently community retail. They were interested in activity center, but we reminded them that activity center was really something that we were holding in reserve to rezone as projects come in and not to do that straight out of the gate. So again, on a 7-0 vote, the Planning Commission is forwarding this statement to you, that this request to rezone the entire approximate 39 square mile jurisdiction, our corporate limits and ETJ of the town of Garner, from existing base and overlay zoning districts to the most comparable proposed base and overlay zoning districts provided for in the draft Garner Forward Unified Development Ordinance, along with readopting, carrying forward existing conditional districts, is consistent with the Garner Forward Comprehensive Plan, and that it will encourage housing, community character, transportation systems, recreation opportunities, and commerce that put renewed focus on the town's existing centers, create a vibrant community, build on existing character, improve value, recognize and support shifting trends in work and employment, connect us physically, grow the role and opportunities for transit, minimize increases in congestion, and celebrate the uniqueness of Garner that sets it apart from neighboring communities. A lot of the same stuff you heard the first time around, fittingly because they go together. Again, staff supports CZ 2201 as proposed, and we have a motion for that worksheet for you on pages 104 and 105. After this, our next steps would be to return the documents to Stuart for final formatting and functionality, hyperlinking. The language would remain unchanged from here, and we would post this to the town's website and other hosting platforms as needed. And we thank you for that tonight. And like I say, Jay is here again this evening to help me with any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Triesenberg. I was thinking as you were presenting, there's lots of information there to consider and to keep straight, and it's a reminder of a lot of the background work that's taken place over time, and we appreciate work with our consultant there, who's here and available for questions, I guess. Just a point of clarification, if I'm understanding correctly, ultimately, we're essentially asking for a vote on both of these items, to adopt ordinance 5132 and 5131. Is that a simple way to to explain it, I guess. Okay, council, you've heard Mr. Triesenberg's presentation. A lot to assimilate here. So, but questions or comments? Mr. Vance, I'll start with you.
I have no questions.
Okay. Come back to Mr. Matthews on this.
No questions.
Okay. Mr. Dellinger.
No questions, just I want to thank our consultants and the staff. I was on the committee with Ms. Behringer, and it was a long 2 years. So it's kind of hard to believe we're here, but good work, and glad we finally made it.
Behringer.
I would echo Mr. Dellinger's remarks and comment that I'm not where Jay got all his patience from, but every time we recommended a change or asked a question, he on, and it was a long 2 years, but it's good work and it's done.
And Mr. Singleton.
Well, I'll be the thorn in the side. There's noticed by many of our votes recently, I'm very concerned with the way that we're approving projects, the way we're growing. Density is an issue I mentioned last year in the election, and I'm still concerned about it. I'm concerned with the current UDO, so therefore I'm not going to vote in support of the new UDO because I don't like the way we're growing. I read, what's mentioned on here, talks about celebrating the uniqueness of Garner that sets it apart from neighboring communities, but we look like everybody else. I mean, I hate to be that blunt about it. I mean, we're ramming and cramming residential projects different places, and I do not like it at all. Why are we Garner? I mean, why don't we just be Raleigh on the east county and carry on the west part of the county and just make it simple, because we're all developing and morphing to the same thing. It's very, very disappointing in the density projects that come forward to us. I'm concerned about the burden on older neighborhoods. This stub policy we're talking about tonight, that issue came up with Cloverdale. It's come up with this proposal at the corner of Grovemont and Timber, connecting to older neighborhoods with a much more dense proposal. Some of that was also with the project with the townhomes on Garner Road. I just shake my head that we had to almost beg a developer to turn the townhomes to face Garner Road. They won't come in and listen to staff. I think there was another proposal also, the ones off Jones Sausage on Wilmington Road, where staff had made recommendations and we practically had to threaten them in here in the meeting to go along with that, and which is uncalled for. That's just bull crap. I'm sorry. It's disappointing in some of the projects that have been approved. I mean, the one on Garner Road, I'll just say this, and it was a 4-to-1 vote. You approved a project that has a 500 square foot amenity area for people to play or do whatever. It said if you look at the language, it would have a shelter, picnic tables, and chairs. 500 square feet is around those chairs out there. That's the amenity area in a 66 townhome project that got approved. I sure hope there aren't many kids living over there, because they sure won't have much room to play. And if they don't play soccer or kickball, they have to use a balloon because they can't get the ball anywhere. And I say that sarcastically, but I say it seriously. We approved a project where the kids had no place to play. I say this firsthand because the townhome project beside my office, because I've spoken to Jeff about it, and they used the field beside me beside Garner Family Physicians and play. They play all kinds of ball. People walk the dogs out there. They have no place in their development to do it. We're ramming and cramming just as much as we can. It's extremely disappointing. It's disappointing to see projects come before us on what are going to be 6-lane U.S. highways for residential projects where they should be commercial. Drive up and down 70 and 401 and see how many residential projects we have fronting on these roads. You don't have many for a reason. I'm disappointed that we're going to, I go to the Trine Road townhomes, apartments. When Mr. Dellinger and I both asked, why don't we make them do the 6 stories? Because while the rapid bus transit may not be coming, why don't we make them do it anyway? But we didn't. Why didn't you make them maximize that density of that project? That's not smart. We settled. That's the problem. We settled. And I'm just extremely disappointed in that. We all agreed at the retreat we want to strive to get close to 50-50 commercial tax base versus residential, and because our residential evaluation and what a penny brings in is much lower than other surrounding towns, particularly in western Wake County. Well, that's why you have to keep pushing the tax rate up, because the properties are valued at less by Wake County. Now, through the next reevaluation, will that change? I don't know. But it's just disappointing. It's some of these projects, and I voted for a lot of them, but some of them are appropriate in certain places and some of them aren't. I mean, it's like we're putting sardines in a can, you know, ramming and cramming. You know, we might have to change the name from Research Triangle Park to Research Rectangular Park because the sardine can's rectangular. And everyone's doing it. I hear these people say, make it as dense as possible. Why would you want to ruin some of the things that we have? I had a concern today that Mr. Friesenberg answered that. I was thankful I emailed him today about if a house got torn down, particularly in older neighborhoods, could townhomes go back in there? They can't. 2 homes could possibly go back there depending on the zoning and the size. But that's when you addressed also the accessory dwelling units. He mentioned that in his email also, which I don't think any of us have an issue with if the lot's big enough. So many of our new lots aren't big enough to do that. I mean, we got new lots, and I know that staff is working hard on some of these projects to make the garage big enough to hold the trash and recycling containers, but we're squeezing so much, people don't have places to put those things. Raleigh just put out 2 new yard waste containers for everyone, and they're getting a lot of feedback because people don't have places to stick them. They'll be visible, but they'll be fined if they're visible and they have no place to stick them. So staff has tried to address that with the size of garages, but I just am very disappointed in the path we've taken. But a lot of 4-1 and 3-2 votes, and I've been on the short end, and somebody said, well, keep voting. You've been on there the longest, they'll listen to you. I said, they ain't listening to me. That ain't happening. So anyway, I don't like the way we're developing now, and I know a lot of work's been put into this and a lot of time and effort, but I just can't support it. I can't. If I don't like the way we're developing now, I'm not going to like the way this week. I'm not going to like the way that we're going to develop next week unless we make some drastic changes as the approval process. So that's where I stand.
Okay, so I think everybody's had a chance to comment. I'm trying to understand, Mr. Singleton, are you ultimately suggesting that the work that the UDO committee has done over these several months that still should require some time and attention by the same committee and some further, shall I say, some further recreations or reworking the wordings in any number of the areas of the UDO that you disagree with?
What I'm saying is that when some of these more visible projects get built, some people are going to say, what in the heck were y'all thinking? Go to the back of the Minglewood townhomes on Avisboro Road, and we all miss that. You know, I mean, I get asked about that all the time, and it does not look good. And one day when the landscape grows up, it'll look fine, look better. But I get asked about that on a regular basis. I go back to getting the townhomes fronted on Garner Road. I had texted something to Mr. Duns. We were talking about something else, about something that had nothing to do with anything, and I made a smart alecky comment and said, while people are discussing this over here, we're trying to get townhomes fronted on Garner Road. I said, and you almost had to beg and borrow to get that done. Staff had mentioned it, and it's just, I just think when some people see some of these projects and they're like, golly, what were y'all thinking? That's just me. I'm not saying to go back and go through it because I don't have the magic answer, a magic wand to make it better. I just think that we're settling for way too many projects. And if our goal is, as stated and mentioned before at the retreat, was to strive for more commercial tax base, because we have to have it, because our tax rate is one of the highest in Wake County, but our evaluations is lower. So it balances in a weird way. And that may not always be a good thing. I sent y'all a text of where the average home price in Cary in the past few years has increased $200,000. I sent y'all that. I don't know if you read it, but anyway, $200,000, the average price for home selling increased. Heck, we weren't even at $200,000 4 or 5 years ago for houses, and ours have increased. So the issue is bigger because of the burden that you put on property owners when our evaluation, if we keep approving residential. Yes, multifamily can rate out and be at a very high tax rate, but we're not doing all that. we have, and staff and Mr. Triesenberg and the planning department does a good job of making them and get rid of vinyl siding, basically, thank goodness. Using some more of the masonry-based type siding and equipment, it's not equipment, I'm sorry, materials, and making some of the units look much better than they did years ago. But I still look at what some other communities do with some of their projects, and they don't look quite like ours. They look to be 1 or 2 or 3 steps up. And again, I think developers have come here and because I think they believe that we'll settle for the project just so we can get it. So again, a UDO committee is not going to make that better. We have to make that. The elected body who approves this has to make those decisions.
If I may I'll respond.
Okay.
And I'll agree with Mr. Singleton's last point. And the UDO we had before was strong. There were a lot of strong elements we carried over, and a lot of it was consolidation. We did some other good things about extending the notification area to 300, from 300 to 1,000, and include not just property owners, but also tenants. There's some things in there, and tree protection. But I think your point is we have to vote how we want to be. And I had a quote, I can't remember where it came from, but we can afford now to wait for great projects. We can afford to wait for great and not settle and not take, they should be happy to be here more than we're happier for them to be here, right? We are the asset. And so I echo what you're saying. We can wait for great.
Okay, thank you. I would note, by the way, that the consultant is here if you have any questions or comments from him. Just on a personal note, I had the privilege of serving for 12 years on this council before becoming mayor. And it was always my intention and my thought that the town of Garner was doing a fairly good job of trying to balance the pressures of growth and the need for more commercial. I felt that we have moved in a positive direction. I realize we could certainly argue on the merits of some of the elements you've mentioned here, but growth in some form or fashion has come our way, and I think will continue to come our way. I think we're all struggling with the best way to manage it, and I think up until now, and even this process that we're looking at tonight is our intent to, obviously, we had a UDO, I think it was at least, 9 or 10 years old when it was last put in place. 2003, yeah, that was the date I was looking for, so it's been an attempt to upgrade and update that. It's not a perfect document, as none would be, that's created by any of us, but I think it's a good effort. But anyway, I'll go back to my point. Anybody want to ask our consultant a question who is here regarding the work? Nope. Okay. I think Mr. Triesenberg covered it pretty well. So the issue before us then is to ask this council to consider and vote on the work that has been reduced to a couple of ordinances that is before you. This comes to us, as you well know, and as articulated by Mr. Triesenberg with unanimous vote from our planning commission. Those guys work hard, and I know most of them, and I have a lot of regard for the good work they do. So that's a factor to be considered. Madam Attorney, I believe, unless I'm missing something, we should now call for a motion, should we not?
Yes, technically you would vote on the UDO, rewrite the text amendments, and then subsequently vote on the map amendments.
First one, ZTA 2201, and then CZ 2201. Okay. Okay, council. I would urge you to consider what's before you, what's been presented, and to show your support or otherwise by a motion. First of all, on the first text amendment, CZA 2201, is the first one before us.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the town council accept the planning commission's written statement regarding consistency of the text amendment request with adopted land use plans for detail in section 5 of the staff report as our own. And I further move that the town council adopt ordinance number 2022-55132, approving text amendment ZTA-22-01 as the request is reasonable and in the public interest because it will likely encourage shared use, mixed use developments, align the development code with the town's desired ends, increase the ability to achieve other goals of the comprehensive plan to improve town operations.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vance. And I believe, Mr. Dellinger, did you second the motion? Okay, thank you. All right. So council, the motion is properly before you at this time. I think we've given everybody an opportunity to offer comments, observations, so it's time to vote. So if you favor the motion that has been made, properly seconded, would you vote aye?
Aye.
Aye.
If you oppose the motion that's before you, would you vote no?
No.
Okay. The chair declares that the motion passes on a 4-1 vote and therefore is approved. So the second item then is ordinance, I believe it's 2022-5132. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're exactly right. Yep. 5131, CZ 2201. And so that is ripe for a motion at this time.
I move that the town council accept the planning commission's written statement regarding consistency of the map amendment request with adopted land use plans detailed in section 5 of the staff report as our own, and I further move that the town council adopt ordinance number 2022-5131 approving map amendment CZ 22-01 as requested as reasonable and in the public interest because it is likely to allow and encourage shared use and mixed use developments, align the development code with the town's desired ends, increase the ability to achieve the other goals of the comprehensive plan or improve town operations.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vance. And the second was made by Councilmember Behringer. Okay. Unless there's further questions or concern, I'll call for a vote on this particular motion. If you favor the motion, would you vote aye?
Aye.
If there's opposition, would you vote no?
No.
Okay. Again, the chair will declare that the motion passes on a 4-1 vote and therefore is approved. I think I'm inclined to maybe call a brief recess at this point in time. We've been going for some time. It's not quite 9 o'clock yet, but we'll come back and pick up item number 5. Jeff, you're still here on that, is that right? Or how long will it take on that? Do you have any idea?
I'll go ahead.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you. So the,
And Mr. Mayor, let me just say, I'm not questioning the committee members or the planning commission or this, that, and the other, but I remember about 20 years ago, we came up with a policy called the water and sewer allocation policy that everyone thought was the greatest thing since sliced bread, including the staff, the council, we talked to business people, and we found out later on through a process that that was a very flawed policy. So you can all come together and think something may work or help to benefit you in the long run and find out maybe it's all got kinks and flaws. And we know how the UDO is, like Jeff already mentioned, there'll be amendments made to it next month. I mean, it's just a constant tweaking this and tweaking that, so it always happens. So I'm not questioning the people who did the work, but I know I've been here and supported the policy and suggested words to it and found out that policy was really quite flawed. So they're not always, despite the work and the good intentions, sometimes it doesn't get the result that you wish for.
okay, sir. Thank you, Mr. Singleton. Anybody else can have a comment? Okay, I'm going to declare a 10-minute, don't stretch it to 15 unless you have to, minute recess. Okay, the mayor declares that we are back in session after a recess. And let me see, I've got to find my place here. We are ready for item 5, I believe it is. Mr. Triesenberg's back up. Character and land use elements. Clue, right, Jeff?
Yes, sir. Good evening again.
Okay, good evening, sir.
So I think the discussion at the close of the last items was actually a real good setup, if not segue into this next item. Kind of acknowledging that, yes, we've adopted a new UDO and new mapping, but things don't stop at that point. Planning is a continuous and evolving process. And so, we talked about this at the council retreat, and this clue proposal grew out of that. And again, it's to produce a amendment package for the comprehensive plan that focuses on the town's character, that's the C, and then comprehensively revisiting our land use plans, that's the LU, and these are elements of our overall planning document, so that's why you get clue. And we did put out an RFQ and got a very good response. And I'm very happy to have Mr. Matt Noonkester here with us tonight from City Explained. And he is here to give you a brief kind of introduction as to kind of how we see this process playing out. We've incorporated that into the draft scope. And again, we do have, we're hoping for at the end of tonight to have authorization for the town manager to enter into the final contract agreements to get this process started, with the goal of hopefully having this, the work done by the end of the year and having the tangible product shortly thereafter, probably beginning of 2023. So without further ado, I'll invite Matt up here now, and we've got a short presentation, and then we'll be happy to answer questions that you may have about either the contract or Matt's company, the partners, and the scope of work.
Give me, I failed to note his full name. What was the name?
Matt Noonkester.
Okay, Noonkester. Well, good evening, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you today. I look forward to a dialogue back and forth. I have prepared a presentation just because that's what consultants do, but we'll have a lot of time to just have some questions and answers, if that's all right. So, first I just want to introduce you, kind of answer who we are, what we do, where we do it, how we do our work, those kind of things, the icebreakers, right? So, I start with the team, and this is the consultant team. It is being led by my firm, City Explained Incorporated. We will be the lead firm. I'll be your direct point of contact. So anything you ever need in terms of accountability or, the buck stops here for everything about the process. I'm joined by members who are passionate about community engagement as well as data analytics, and I'll go into that in more detail. But I'm also smart enough to know here that we need to have a very robust team. And so it's an experienced team that we have put together for this project, representing transportation interest, implementation experts, urban designers, economists, and JJ Zanetta, the giveaway is the headphones, but he's our artist, and you'll see some of his work as we go through this. If you are a numbers person and you're worried about that, I think I'm up to about 47 comprehensive plans in 17 states over 25 years. So we've been doing this a lot, and it's been a really enjoyable experience all the way. So in terms of where our team works, it literally is coast to coast and border to border. So from Maine to Hawaii and North Dakota to Florida and everywhere in between. And what this has done is given us a lot of exposure to experience and expertise about how other people are doing things and solving problems. And so we bring that to you in a lot of openness. A lot of our minds have been open to how communities have been able to survive and thrive through the years. But I want to also hone in on the fact that we love working in North Carolina. 90% or so of our team are all based out of North Carolina. the economist of South Carolina, but we bring him up here all the time, so we kind of count him as one of our own as well. But here you just see 10 plans that have been done recently by our team, and where you see the little ribbon is where we were actually recognized by the North Carolina American Planning Association. Marvin Collins Award is one of the plans of the year that they award. So we always like to see that kind of response back. But you can see we've worked in southern Wake County, either with Holly Springs or Fuquay-Varina. We've also worked in some other places I think we can learn, like Pinehurst. We'll be working in Southern Pines and some of those kind of places as well, of kind of what they're struggling with and maybe some of the ideas they have that we can share with you. Now, as conversation starters, and this is just the beginning of a list that we would work on as we go through our process, but just to answer some of the things that we think we need to bring up during this process. One is kind of what is the character of Garner? We're very big on the fact that you can't hit the bullseye if you don't know where the target is. So we want to work very hard to figure out what is that character of Garner, and is it town-wide or does it apply differently in different places? And I would argue it's more the latter probably, and how the strength of those different places create one community. And so we go through that process with you. The NC 540 corridor obviously has a major impact, whether it's transportation or economic, through your community, as well as all the others it goes through. And so what does that mean for you? What is the vision that you want to set for that corridor? One of the other things I think is interesting is again, in the UDO agenda item, there was talk about, all the development that's been approved. One of the things we like to do, and I'll go through this in our process, but we look at what are the cumulative impacts of all the things you've already approved so far. What does that mean for transportation, schools, parks, water, sewer service? What is the cumulative effect of all those individual decisions you made to know kind of what path you're on right now? So we like to do that. And then we talk about prioritizing different improvements in different areas to get return on investment. We all acknowledge you're like every other community that does not have unlimited funds. And so we have to prioritize where you put things and how do you partner with different folks to make sure you get the biggest return on investment. The idea of open space, you talk about open space, but then how is it defined? What is the critical mass of open space? Just like a street system, how do you create connected open space? So you go from one piece to the other and it looked like it was intended to be that way. And then as has been mentioned a couple of different times on the UDO, what's really interesting is to kind of understand where these things fall in place. So the document we're talking about now sets the vision and the policy, but it's actually implemented through the UDO and other investments and those kind of things. So we've never avoided it, where there's going to be some things in the UDO that'll have to be revised even after you go through this planning process, because you're going to be talking about different policies and expectations. And so the UDO will have to follow suit on that. So just a couple of thoughts and words about how we work. One of the interesting things that our team has put together in terms of a philosophy is it's all about character. Some people jump right into what is the land use going to be, what is the density going to be, all that. We think if we just sit and get the character right first for Garner, everything else falls in place and should reinforce that singular goal, right? So if we're talking about different land uses, let's make sure that the way they look and feel and how they're organized and oriented reinforces the character that you want. And if you're doing that, let's make sure the investments you're making reinforce that and those kind of things. So one of the things that's unique about our planning process is we organize it all around character, and then all the other topics kind of fall into place underneath there. Now we do have a plan in place, so just to assure you that we do have a method to our madness and we know what we're doing. Generally speaking, we start very early of just getting our house in order, making sure that our team can learn as much as we can from your team. Then immediately we start our partnering strategy, and I'll go into more details of that, but that's really the foundation of our planning process, is engaging with the community. We also do our data inventory and analysis. I kind of sometimes call it the adult book report. We're just trying to learn all the numbers and facts and what's going on. And then you see we do the likely impacts analysis, and we do that before we start visioning because, again, going back to your committed development, we want to know what you've already sort of agreed to or committed to and what are the impacts of that, and to take that into account before we start visioning about the future. Planning cycle 4 that you see there is where we spend a lot of time. It's where we try to get, again, that target so we can hit the bullseye. But what is the vision and guiding principles? A statement or statements on community character, so setting those expectations great. I love the phrase "waiting for great" or demanding great. Even I think is a good mindset to have here. This is also where the future land use map will live. That's kind of the organization of the community and creates all the demand for services. It also creates the ability to generate the revenues and things that you were talking about earlier. There's some focus area studies. I'm going to show you what those are to demystify that concept here for you. And then you see at the very bottom, we have this crosswalk back to the UDO. So we don't want to leave you guessing or dangling on where to go to implement this plan. We're going to actually create crosswalks and matrices and stuff so you can see a roadmap in order to get to the UDO as well. The other thing I just want to mention here is the Garner Forward plans, other plans you've done. This is also our time to link all of those together as well. It's not a time to turn our back on all of those. Again, like was mentioned with the UDO, we're going to take what's positive out of those and we'll dig into more details on the things that we feel just need to be sharpened up to be more clear about your intended outcomes in a predictable future. And then ultimately, we'll actually write the document and we'll go through that process of revising it with you. Now, I told you I've worked on a lot of plans, and I will tell you the beginning, like today's meeting, we all know today's, the first discussions we're able to have back and forth. And we know that ultimately we're going to have adopted document in the end. What happens in between, I'm smart enough to tell you, we don't know exactly how this is going to go. There's going to be opportunities that come up we didn't know about. There's going to be issues that arise we didn't know about. And so our team is purposely set up, and the reason that we all own our own firms is because we can make our own decisions. We're very flexible in our process. I don't want to tell you that we can't have a meeting because it wasn't in the contract that was signed, months before. We are very flexible in how we do this. I want to make the adoption hearing process as easy as possible. If that means doing an extra meeting or something like that, that's what we do, because our ultimate goal is almost a victory lap at adoption, not a lot of arguing and those kind of things. So we are very flexible in our process. What we're less flexible on here, though, is to try to keep us focused on how we do our work. You see here, we do a lot of community listening, and I'll go over some of the things we've set up for that already. And then we do a lot of data and analysis to try to make sure, what are the trends showing us? How can we bend the trends? How can we make it work for you? And then we bring to you our best practices and the best practices and experiences of staff as well, working with your documents. Where those three things start to overlap, that's the sweet spot for writing the document. That means the public supports it, the data analysis does think it's possible, and we've had some experiences to show that it has worked in other communities. That's where we're trying to write this document for you that we bring for adoption. And then back to this is what we just keep repeating in our heads, is what is the essence of Garner? What is it we're trying to protect? What is it that we value? What is it that we want to make sure we highlight in the document? That's what we want to do. And so whether it's places or whether it's experiences or whether it's community and how you bring community together, those are the kind of things that we're ultimately trying to do, and it'll work, the details will work itself out within the plan. Okay, so in terms of our engagement process, I introduced our team. That was the consultant team. In terms of a partnering process, we assume that working with you all as the elected body, as well as the appointed officials of the Planning Commission and others like that, that's the larger team. And then we bring on board the 34,000 and growing residents of Garner. They're also part of the team, right? And so, because that's how you transfer ownership. The one thing that I like to say, and I don't mean this as shock value, but I don't live here. So my main interest is the process. I want to make sure that this process is genuine and that you support it when you're done. The fingerprints we get on from the community, from you all and others, that's what's going to ensure its credibility, the fact it lives on, the fact you can implement it, the fact you can defend it when the first person comes to this podium trying to say, I want to do something different than the plan. That's where the real power of the plan is. So we really try to take our engagement strategy very, very serious. And we also say, well, we're not just going to do what we've done last time. We actually have this toolbox like you see here. And we're ultimately always asking ourselves, well, what are we trying to do with engagement at that point in the process? Are we trying to teach a topic or a concept? Are we trying to just get information out or maybe the draft documents out? Are we actually looking for two-way communication where we collaborate? Are we looking for feedback on something we've put out to listen? Or are we trying to create buy-in in that process? And once we know where we're at there, we go into our toolbox and figure out what is the appropriate approach there. I'll tell you for where we're at in the contract right now, we have the following things as we think essential as the core elements of our process. We'll have stakeholder interviews. I hope that you all would join us for those, as well as many others as we can find. And that's just for us early in the process to kind of hear where everybody's mind is and what they're thinking. We will do online engagement. We'll have a project website specific to this project. It'll have a lot of activities and things on it. We've gotten really good now at even when we do a community meeting, we have it live on. We call it its digital twin. And it may live on 10 or 14 days longer online, and we do the same activities we did in person, but maybe somebody couldn't get to the in-person event. So we do a lot of that. We do think having a project steering committee is important, a group of people who will start and finish this process with us and be a sounding board as we go through. But then we also think there's probably one or more topics that are going to require us to have what we call strategic advisory groups. And that's where we dive into a specific topic. And I'll give you an example. We did this in Howard County, Maryland, and their three were environmental stewardship, missing middle housing, so trying to figure out this very specific housing type that they had there. And for them, it was public schools. That is the lightning rod issue in their community. And so we had a specific group on that because we knew if we didn't address it, it would derail the entire process. So those strategic advisory groups, they may have citizens on them, but they may also have national experts or state experts or whoever to try to give us as much information about that topic as possible. Then we go back to the project steering committee as our sounding board on that. So that's a concept we have. We do also have live events. We have the community character workshops that we'll be doing. We have this thing called On the Table, which I'll show you in just a minute. Then obviously policymaker briefings. I do not want to see you the next time at the adoption meeting. That's too long. We're going to have to interact quite a bit because I want to make sure you understand how we got to where we did. We also have a line item for public education curriculum. So there'll be concepts and things that come out that maybe are just too mysterious that people form their own opinions about what it means. We're just going to put that aside and we'll put a 1 or 2 page flyer out or something that just explains the concept as it's intended for the plan. So all of those things are in our current engagement toolbox for this project. Now, the pandemic, taught us a lot of stuff. One of the things it taught us is that online engagement is powerful. It usually expands and broadens the footprint of who you get to speak with. So we will have that either through our project website or even some surveys and things that we do. We think that's a way to broaden the footprint for the planning process. But the other thing I've kind of learned is I think when you still really have to get compromise and consensus and talk about hard issues, in person is still a really effective way to do it. It's a very respectful way to do it, and we tend to reach consensus. So we're going to go where the people are. You see just from some of our other projects, it might be the community fair in the top left in Cumberland, Tennessee, or the holiday party in Cedar Hill, Texas, where we helped roast marshmallows with the community. And so on and so forth. So we've got storefronts we might do in downtown. Down in Snowmass, Colorado, we caught people going up to the chairlift to go ski. We try to find out how it is we can plug in the community, and we make sure we do that. The other thing I'll just mention is we don't just work Monday through Friday. If it means Saturday and Sunday, we have to go find ways to get in with the community. That's what we're going to do as part of our process. And then I mentioned that concept On the Table. This was actually originally started in the city of Chicago. They did it as a one-day event where they invited community groups to get around a table and share a meal and just talk about what they thought the city should be. Working with other folks in the profession, we've kind of transformed this into what we call a meeting in a box. So we've created it as like a host toolkit. And then we actually have plan ambassadors, and we would do this in Garner where we would say, just go have a casual conversation you see over wine or at a dinner table and the like. And here's just some questions to talk about. And people feel really at ease about doing that. And in the end, as we're tracking this, sometimes our biggest numbers in terms of participation come from this exercise here. We may even ask you all to lead a group that you'd want to speak with. It's really open to anybody, and we try to really kind of get it going. This has been really effective as we go through our process. Now, in terms of some of the work that we do, one of the things that we're really trying to focus on character, so the way we do that is we look at the DNA of Garner. How did it develop? When did it develop? What influenced its development? So we will kind of poke and prod and take apart the urban form of your town to figure out why did it get to the way it was? And what things are we really proud of and what things do we have to try to mitigate? So we'll go through that process with you. There's a lot of analysis that goes with that. Then also there's going to be certain things where there'll be town-wide recommendations. So here's an example from the Fuquay-Varina land use plan where aging shopping centers, what do you do with them? What's their next life? So a townwide recommendation about how you allow redevelopment of these centers to occur. Or here's another example from their plan where they talked about open space. And so if you just require open space, but it's not meaningful, it's not intentional, then what does that mean? So like in the upper left-hand corner, you see, well, there's all these industrial developments now, and sometimes breweries or test kitchens or things want to go in there. How do you create a laboratory where the community can experience that? And how do you make sure it's not just a little triangle in the end that the developer didn't want to mess with anyways, but it's actually meaningful? And then all the different other hierarchies of open space and how they work together. It can be a townwide. And then I'd mentioned that these focus areas. So that concept is where we want to dive into a physical place within the town and study it in more detail. It might be a corridor, it might be an activity center, but we really get in and draw this stuff. So what ends up happening is you make a statement like, I support mixed-use activity centers. And you make it so broad that we can all agree it's good. But then when we start to draw it, we're like, oh no, I didn't mean that dense. I didn't mean that much parking. I didn't mean that, no landscaping, no open space. So we test our big ideas by doing these drawings, and they really make sure that you're happy with where the compass is pointing. And then when they go into a document, they might be more like this, where they're conceptual, and they just talk about big ideas like, okay, how do you organize an activity center so it's to your liking? Going back kind of to what we were talking about in your UDO item, being more intentional with the development applications that are coming in. Let them see this stuff in your plan to see sort of what the targets are for what you'd like. And then when you come into more specific areas, here's an existing road now, and what if you did front the buildings on the street and they were allowed to become more dense, and we did put a mix of uses because we had an intention of balancing our tax base and the like. But give me a target again. And so this is something there that can do that for you. And then the other thing, this is the part of the presentation where I say I love visioning, but visioning should never become hallucination, because hallucination is dangerous. We don't know if we're on the right path or not. So the other thing that we want to have going in the background for this entire process is what we call our scenario planning and likely impacts analysis. What we mean by that is we draw pictures, we put colors on maps, but we never really know what is the full outcome of those things. So as part of that process, we've created kind of a tool and a series of steps that says, okay, where are we now? Where are we going? And when we have these options, what are the trade-offs of these options? So we go through that process, and this is just an example that you see. This is from Athens, Alabama. And the first scenario we looked at is, what are you already on the hook for? What is your committed development? What have you already committed to in terms of improvements and how you've changed your community? And then we look at that and we compare it to, okay, what happens if you just take your zoning ordinance as it is today? What if you just build that out? Does that get you what you intended? And then we look at that. And then scenarios 3, 4, 5, and 6 could be alternatives that have come out of our planning process. Ultimately, what we end up doing is comparing them. And so what you see here for those scenarios, and we had a third in there, just if you're looking at why there's extra numbers in here. But, okay, there should be no surprise if you look in the left-hand corner, if you do the city zoning ordinance and you let it build out, well then when the police chief comes and asks you for 132 more officers, this is how you got there, because you approved this much more development with this much more demand. But if you let your growth go even more accelerated, then they're going to ask for 368 more officers at full build out of your community. And we do this for police, fire, schools, water, sewer, transportation, and the like. And so we actually have some data to react to when we look at these alternatives and solutions that we have together. So I promised you I wasn't going to do all the talking, and I feel like I am. So I'm going to stop there and just be able to answer any questions or take any comments that you have, and staff or whoever else can help me answer them.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It's a good delve into the process, and followed pretty quickly through it seems like, sure enough. So as I usually do, I'll give the council the great opportunity to ask questions or make comments. It's been a while since I personally have been involved in one of these, I believe. I'm not sure if I was previous town I lived in. But at any rate, having said that, I'll start on my right with Ms. Behringer to see if she has any questions or comments.
Almost makes me feel like we should have seen this before we saw the last item that we give us a little bit more confidence or a little bit more optimism, but I like it. I've been involved in these here in the past, years past, and I'm glad to see that we're going to be able to fresh and look at where we're going today.
Okay, back to my left, Mr. Singleton.
Still thinking.
Mr. Dellinger. Okay.
I appreciate your presentation and you being here and the work you've done. And I'll speak for me. And you can do with that. One of the biggest challenges I think we have is the disconnect that exists between what we already have in our comprehensive plan and the decisions we make. There's no linkage, there's no quantitative linkage between the two. I think we've been dissuaded from using the comp plan to inform the decisions we make on individual projects. Deferring to haste and projects that have been in the process a long time. We got to get this through. So I like you're looking at the growth we know. I've been saying this for I don't know how many months. But I think there should be an element of rating some of the things we've done and how did they even align to what we said we wanted. I said it in our last council meeting. We got commuter rail coming, Auburn-Knightdale. We know it's coming, and we approved single-family homes adjacent to it. Missed opportunity. This council needs data tools. So to measure like you were just saying, what is the impact? And then what is the opportunity cost of this decision versus something else that could go there? What are the revenue impacts? How far does it take us away from that 50-50 residential, commercial tax base we want, that we won't feel now, but we may feel in 10, 15 years? And I think we need help ambitions while keeping our character. I think we all know you'll be the one to learn what our character is, right? You've said it. We know, and we know parts of it are going to be harder to hold on to as we grow. But as Mr. Singleton had said earlier, we're selling out is a harsh way to say it, but we're taking what's being handed to us as opposed to demanding greatness, the greatness we want to be. I'll stop there, but I think we want the data-driven between the comp plan and our ambitions and vision, and then whatever gets presented in front of us, and being able to take that step back in a council meeting, in a public hearing, in a rezoning, and say, let's step this back up to 30,000 feet. Let's not just look at how wide the setbacks are, 2 or 3 feet more than they want, which is, I think, happens a lot as we get just look at the size of the windows on the side of the house, and versus, oh, this is going to ruin the tax base for the next generation of people who live in Garner. I have a couple more comments, but I'll pass on to someone else.
Okay, thanks, sir. Mr. Vance, comments?
I'll just say that, Mr. Newcastle, glad that you're on board here for this character and land use element comprehensive plan update. Looking forward to it as it develops and falls out. And I'm just excited to see how things progress. And I'll leave it there for right now.
Okay. Mr. Matthews?
I think the timing on this is really unique and good with what we got going on. And your team y'all are certainly well organized, and it's going to be interesting to see some of the data that comes back out, especially when you meet with the community and get their feedback. So I'm looking forward to all that. And so hopefully once we put all this together with the growth and what we're trying to look at here, we'll, as you hit those three circles, maybe they'll come a little bit closer than where we're at right now.
True.
Berringer, did I get you? Ms. Singleton, are you out of your thought process and ready to talk?
I was thinking, but I can do a little talking too, like Mr. Dellinger. I can try to do two things at once. One thing Mr. Dellinger mentioned was about reinventing our ambitions. I don't know if I'd use the word reinventing, but we need to clarify our ambitions. And it's not just one or two ambitions, there'll probably be multiple ones, and then we clarify those ambitions and look with long-range goals, long-term in the elements, the land use elements, as you heard me talk earlier. We need to put that down, and you've got to try to stick to it. That's the problem, is sticking to it, saying, well, this is what we need to do. Well, again, I go back to settling for some of the projects we've had come in. We can do better, we should do better, and that needs to be clarified with our ambitions of what we're trying to seek. So I like what you put together as far as the process you go through, and look forward to being involved with the process.
And I would just observe to use an overused term that I guess means different things to different people, but I'm not originally from this town, but I moved here with my young family 34 years ago, I guess it was, many years ago. And you know, Garner, during that time, has become a more diverse town. There's diversity in our town that was came. I think diversity is sort of a normal process, but I think diversity is a very positive thing for a town and its people. Some people don't necessarily agree with that assessment, I suppose, but we're in an area, in a region where we're attracting people from a lot of different places, and even on an international scale. And it kind of excites me to see, you know, how we can merge different cultural groups together. Sometimes it requires some hard work, I think. And you know, we're not a big metropolitan area. We live close to our state capital in Raleigh, and that has some influence, obviously, on our town. But again, to go back to my initial thoughts, I think this process will perhaps help us see how becoming a more diverse area has impacted us, and the positive things and maybe some of the negative things that have happened. But overall, I think anytime a town and its citizens can look at itself and try to be introspective, that can be a positive thing. Anybody else?
I just have another thought, and you know, everyone's excited and we want to do this, but how serious are we about applying what we learn and applying through the process to what comes before us while we're doing this? I think it's an opportunity even as this process starts. You know, it's one thing, oh, we got this project on the background, let's rush these projects through, and, you know, to be asking the questions as these projects come through and we go through this process and say, what information would help us make this decision and connect it to our ambitions, as Mr. Singleton's talking about, our ambitions and our vision that we have historically had in our existing plan, and then as we have these other conversations, making sure those conversations you're having with this engagement are coming into this council chamber as well. Because a lot learned about traffic or this, that, and the other, but that doesn't make it as part of our consideration, you know, input, right? So that's sort of, I think, a challenge for us, is to use this process and not put it off to the side, but to bring it into this council chamber for projects we're looking at, and look at them with a different eye and say, we do want to be better, we want to do better, and integrate the two, basically.
Anything else, Mr. Vance, Ms. Berringer, on this side? John, anything? Okay. I think what we're asked to do tonight is to go ahead and authorize the town manager to put his signature on a contract with this company. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
I move we authorize the town manager to execute the contract with City Explained Incorporated.
Second.
For the motion and the second, any further question? Hearing none, if you approve the motion, would you vote aye?
Aye.
Aye.
There's opposition, no, and there is none. So certainly an ongoing get acquaintance and moving ahead over time, and look forward to the process we go through, and of course the how we come out on the other end, I guess.
Thank you all very much for your confidence, and instead of goodbye, we'll just say see you later. All right?
Okay?
We'll
Fair
be working
enough.
together.
Good deal.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, sir. Okay, I believe I have completed everything on the agenda except for item number 6. Am I keeping up properly here? Okay. So item number 6 is the non-discrimination ordinance that every council member here is aware of. This is an ordinance that Wake County has invited the various municipalities in Wake County to sign on to. Our town attorney gave us a good presentation on this at our previous meeting. The council at that time received the information and decided that it wanted to wait at least until this meeting for further discussion and hopefully to take action on this matter this evening. Consider adopting Resolution 2022-2496. In just a moment, I'm going to ask Ms. Jones if she will just kind of give us a summary of the information that we shared before. I will, before I do that, there aren't many folks here in the public, but is there anyone here who came with the express purpose of wanting to address the council briefly on this matter? Is there anybody? Seeing and hearing none, Ms. Jones, if you will, maybe sort of recapture for us and remind us of the essence of the ordinance and where we go from here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening. I didn't plan to do a formal presentation since we just did that last week, but just briefly, Wake County adopted a non-discrimination ordinance last fall. It became effective February 1st of this year. What it does is it takes all of the various protected classes that are protected by different federal and state statutes or interpreted in case law and created a comprehensive list of all of those classes. It is also more expansive than federal and state law in that it covers more employers and more businesses in the areas of employment law and public accommodations. So it is a more broad ordinance. However, it is not binding or has the teeth that some ordinances might have. There's no criminal penalties associated with it. It does create a complaint process through an online portal with the county, which would then be referred to voluntary conciliation at at Campbell University. It does not require the alleged discriminator to attend that conciliation process, but it provides an opportunity for dialogue and a mutually acceptable resolution to that. Wake County has also reserved the ability to take civil enforcement action in bringing a case, an injunctive action against someone if it is deemed that discrimination has occurred. That would have to be filed through the court system at that point. So as with any Wake County ordinance, it cannot be applicable within municipal town limits unless the municipality basically opts in by adopting a resolution. Given that there are some costs associated with that, with Wake County taking over the enforcement and providing this process of conciliation, there would be a cost-sharing arrangement in the second, year of this. And that's why Wake County would require that an interlocal agreement between the county and the town of Garner be adopted if the town wants to participate in this program. So tonight, it's on your agenda if you would like to adopt a resolution and authorize the interlocal agreement, and those materials are available in your packet.
Okay, and I don't think this is a question that was asked before, but as I read through it, and as we potentially commit to this as a town, there's obviously an opt-out clause. Town can opt out. I shouldn't say without notice, but I mean it's available if it chooses. Is that correct?
Right. You could terminate the interlocal agreement. That would also require either to rescind the resolution opting in, or for the town to take over some kind of enforcement, investigation and enforcement program.
Suggesting that would happen, but I think it's well to know that going into it. So I'm going to give the council opportunity to discuss further.
A little more formal, but in a little more structure with Robert's rules to start debate. I'd like to make a motion that we adopt resolution number 20222496.
Okay. The recommended motion, UDO. Second that? Okay, yeah. All right. All in favor of the motion, would you vote?
Discussion.
Excuse me. Oh, okay, yeah, you're right, yeah, I'm sorry, yep. I studied those many years ago, I need to go back and review some there, yeah, okay. So, yeah, a motion is before you, and now's the time for a discussion on the matter. So, I will recognize each council member along the way, and I'll start with Mr. Dellinger, who made the motion here.
I have no comment other than I think it's a good signal to communities and people that don't know Garner to know who we are. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thanks, sir. Ms. Behringer, comments?
Of them, yes. Garner has never had a reputation for this is not adopting this resolution would not change anything here. It would present some guidelines and some avenues for dealing with potential issues. But do we need to do it, to adopt it, to continue being who we are? Not necessarily, but to be part of the community and to send the message that we care and that we want to make sure that all should adopt the ordinance.
Okay. Mr. Vance, any observations, comments?
I just want to say that in my research and looking into this ordinance, I understand and found and discovered that the Raleigh Chamber has embraced this ordinance, and I'd just like to quote what was said. It was said that this is an important step to strengthen our business community. We embrace all efforts and initiatives around diversity, equity, inclusivity, also, as does our business community. The Chamber is proud to support this work, and we will continue our support through our Triangle of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusivity Alliance. I would say that's a strong message being sent by the Chamber, which is well known, represents the business community for Raleigh, for the Raleigh area. and I work up under the assumption that this is considered a good avenue or a good step when it comes to the business community, not only in Raleigh, but also in Garner as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vance. Mr. Singleton, any observations?
I want to thank Ms. Jones first for taking the time to learn about this, explain this to us. She answered our questions, she answered our emails, she answered our questions again, answered emails again. So she spent a lot of time researching this and providing us with information, so I appreciate that. I remember when this first came out and I kept reading it over and over. And the one surprising thing, which I thought maybe I had missed, but in her explanation to us, was that, as she stated in her comments a few minutes ago, there's the teeth in the ordinance is not very clear and strong from that standpoint. It does involve the conciliation process for the parties to get together. But if someone alleges being discriminated against, they could go through the civil process and hire counsel and file a lawsuit. So that was kind of the surprising thing to me. I think it's a symbolic type of ordinance to let people know that your community is, trying to be as open-minded and have open doors for people as you possibly can. So I think that's what I think was the original goal of Wake County was to try to get the rest of the county to come on board as being an open-minded and maybe progressive thinking community. So again, I was surprised for the lack of, I reckon, teeth actually in the ordinance itself, but I think the goal of the character is to let people know, not the goal of the character, the goal of the ordinance, I'm sorry, is to let people know that the character of the community is to be open-minded and try to welcome people from all backgrounds. So I think there's pluses there also. I just think people need to understand that it's, still, if someone feels they've been discriminated against, they're still going to have to go through the legal process.
Sure. Okay, Mr. Matthews.
I also want to thank Ms. Jones for explaining a whole lot, and had a chance to talk with her off and on just to get a thorough understanding of what's going on, and I appreciate that, and hope the folks out there listening understand it too. So, thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Don't know if staff wants to come in, or the town manager or assistant managers. Certainly not required, but if you have any, hear from you.
Yeah, I would just say that the ordinance, as I understand it in our meetings at Wake County, is just an avenue to give someone an opportunity to be heard and to resolve any issues that may come about. It's not necessarily endorsing anything or any all the things that are in here necessarily. What it is an indictment on discrimination is the main thing about it, and that this community is not for discrimination in any form or fashion, and that there's some things that are covered in the federal statutes, protected classes, but there are some things that are not, and there are people in the community that have experienced discrimination based on some of these things, and up till now they really didn't have a path to resolve that. So this just kind of gives an extra avenue to help resolve some of those things. And if this process doesn't resolve it, then of course there is always the legal system above and beyond that. And some people may not have the means to go that route, so this is a very good first step. So.
Thank you. Either one of the assistant managers, I'm not suggesting you should, but if you want to comment, okay. Anything? Okay, all right. All right, first round of comments, observations, part of the discussion before we move on for the adoption, but give council members a second go around. Any other thoughts or observations that anybody has at this point?
One last, just we are coming off our July 3rd celebration, and I think we should be as zealous about protecting freedom as we are about celebrating it. That's the only comment.
Okay, thanks, sure. Okay. Are is the council satisfied that the matter before you has been given proper attention and discussion? And if so, I believe the resolution before us would ask for your consideration, which would be a vote on the matter after we've had this discussion. And if you're satisfied with that, I believe the motion was to consider adoption of Resolution 2022-2496. So you ready to vote? Okay, so the motion properly made and has been said. Did you second the motion, Ms. Behringer? Okay, okay, before you. So I'm going to call for a vote. Those of all council members who favor the motion before you in regards to this resolution, would you vote aye?
Aye. Aye.
And those in regards to the vote on Resolution 2020-2496 who don't support the motion, would you vote no? Okay. Here's that there's no opposition and the motion passes and the ordinance is adopted. I won't make comments other than say to council, I appreciate your consideration of it and appreciate it. I think it's a good, positive thing for our town. Certainly, I'll do all I can as mayor to support it and to make sure that it becomes ingrained as part of who we are in Garner. As Sever said, we think we are a welcoming town, and we certainly want to continue to be that. So this, I think, is at least a verbal assent to what it is that we want to do. Any other comments on this matter? Okay, hearing none, we will now go to the part of our agenda under committee reports. Are there any committee reports that we should hear from tonight? I'm not aware of any. Okay, none? All right. Mr. Manager, are you prepared for any manager reports?
Yes. Town engineer Chris Johnson's going to come up here and give an update on the capital project status and update you on some of those projects.
Good.
Good evening, everybody. Again, I'll just hit the high points on it. For as far as the town's street and sidewalk projects, White Oak Roundabout is continuing, starting to get into the late stages of land acquisition. And as the attorney's office works with those settlements, we're also progressing the design of that project towards a 90% design submittal for NCDOT in hopes that once the land acquisition is completed, we'll be ready to already closing in on the final plans and estimates and everything that we have to go through, given that is a federally funded project, has lots of touch points with NCDOT before we're able to advertise it. So that is a lot of ongoing work on that project ahead of hopefully advertising late this year. And then, as you know, Lake Drive was just recently awarded today, so that will be moving forward. The Jones Sausage Road, as you know, we presented that project to you at the last work session, and we've got a public meeting scheduled for this Thursday. It's going to be at the Garner Senior Center, and we're looking forward to presenting the information for the preliminary design to all the residents that live along that corridor. That's again from 6 to 7:30. So, and you're welcome to come out and take a look at that. The Pearl Street and Parker Street project, we recently heard on that one earlier tonight. So design will be getting underway for that project. And then Vandora Springs Road, it's about 25% complete. There was a water line, some delays. You probably noticed that some of the work activity had slowed down out there or came to a stop for a few weeks, but the contractor is now moving forward with the remaining water main work, as well as has already started on some of the storm drainage lines on the south side of the road. So we're expecting to see more activity out there in the coming weeks as we try to progress forward. And then we've got 3 of the new sidewalk projects, the Garner Road, Aversboro Road, and Bryan Road. Those are all in preliminary design, and either we have just received our first set of plans for those or are expecting them in the coming weeks. And so we will be taking those towards, we'll probably have a public involvement meeting for each of those as they get closer to 50% design, since they're more simplistic projects in comparison to your large roadway projects. But we'll also bring those to you in advance of those public involvement meetings. On the stormwater side, we've got Junction Boulevard and Forest Ridge Road, which are two large stormwater maintenance projects, and we're also working with the town attorney. Those are about 90% complete on design, and we're working through some small easement acquisition on those before we get final permitting for those. But those are just small takings on only a few properties on each project. So we're looking to advertise those projects late this year. And then I'm happy to relay that we have just recently finished the annual resurfacing project. So that closed out last week, with the exception of the change order that y'all recently approved to do the traffic calming speed humps in Hunter's Mark. Those have been marked out, and we'll hopefully get those done in the next week or two. But all the other work on the resurfacing contract has come to a close, so it won't be long, and we'll start looking. We're going to be doing a updated pavement condition scoring with Public Works this summer, and then we'll be utilizing those new scores to try to prioritize our next contract. And then on the NC.DOT section, just so you know, with a lot of the several projects getting pushed back, and then we've also had over the last year several new projects come online that were smaller. You might notice that we've kind of rearranged the order. I've tried my best to try to put them in chronological order of when they will roll out based on what we have today. So that's why some of them may have moved around in the list. But right now we've got in construction, the ADA curb ramp project is ongoing, and that's about 15% complete. You'll start seeing a lot intersections around town, some of the intersection ramps being upgraded by NC.DOT. That will be that project. The New Bethel Church Road bridge replacement, although it has continued to see delays, they are still telling us that they hope to have that project complete by the end of the year. And I believe last I spoke, they were talking about getting traffic moved over onto the temporary bridge imminently. I don't know if that's actually taken place yet, but I haven't driven out there myself, but it was supposed to be happening very soon.
When I drove out there, 2 days ago, it had not yet happened.
Not yet. Okay. Well, keep our fingers crossed. Yeah. Then 17, 18, and 19, that's three of those newer projects that have kind of been on the list, but they've been further down, but they're moving through design quite quickly. That's why I moved them up on the list. So they are all three showing as 100% design complete, and they are looking to, they've already awarded those three projects last month. So they're hoping to have all three constructed by the end of this year. And that's the 1010 Road intersection improvement at Old Stage, the Old Stage Road at Vandora Springs intersection, and then 1010 Road at Fanny Brown Road. And then you get into your larger projects, I-40 widening and NC 540. They're just continuing to make progress. And those are still on plan for completion in 2024. And then US 401 widening, the U5302 project that is planned for a December letting and contract completion in 2025. And the 7050 bridge replacement, that has been pushed back to February of next year for award. I think it was originally slated for the end of this year, but they did push it back a few more months. And then the NC 50 widening at Timber and New Rand is another project that's been making some progress. It's about 75% complete and currently on plans for a February 23 letting. I think most of the others are a little bit further out, and I'll be happy to answer any specific questions, but that's the main items that I had for you today.
Council, I'll just sort of throw it open to you. Anybody have questions for Chris?
I got one, Mr. Mayor. On the Vandora Springs Road, it's near and dear to my heart since I drive through there every day. And I know it was on a 2013 bond, and it was 1.3 million and some change. with what all's going on, how close are we going to come into that budget? You think, obviously going to be some overruns, I'm thinking.
It's really hard to tell at this stage. I don't know. I mean, we've already had all of our contract prices locked in. We haven't had any major changes to the scope of work. The main issues with the delays thus far is we had a couple months there where AT&T's old lines were still live and activated and right in line with our water and storm drainage. And it took us quite a long time to get those older abandoned lines deactivated so that we could move forward. But the delays have not really been a major impact to the overall project cost as of yet.
We do believe we'll be able to finish funding that project out of the 2013 bonds. Some other projects we have moved over to 2021 with the expectation that Van Door will be the last project that we primarily fund out of the 2013 bonds.
Okay, other questions for Mr. Johnson?
Question, on the 7050 bridge replacement, this is like at least the third time it's been pushed back. What is the reason for that?
Don't know specifically on it. I haven't gotten an update on that since the last time, but it's actually more common than you would think for them to do it. I've seen that on a lot of the projects that we've had. Many times it's due to either utility coordination or right-of-way acquisition taking longer than expected. And unfortunately, we've had a few projects that have been pushed back on this list multiple times just for right-of-way. And so, of course, it's the weakest link. If you have one or two properties that you're having issues with, that can kind of cause the entire project to get pushed back.
Start on it this time when they say they are either, right?
Ms. Behringer, the first of those big pushbacks on that project, along with a lot of other ones, was the major funding issue that DOT had a while back. That was the first big push, was that, and then since then, as Chris said, it's the process of trying to catch up.
Okay, anybody else for Mr. Johnson?
Question that may be for Mr. Johnson and Mr. Dickerson and the whole crew. It's my first bond fund rodeo. So, you know, the Jones Sausage Road project is funding source listed as bonds. What's the process through which we decide how we're utilizing those bond funds, particularly since the price for the Jones Sausage Road project is significantly more than when we had entered into the project, and I think there was sort of an expectation that there may be other projects that we could start funding or match funds with. So I'm curious as to what the process is for.
We actually are talking about having a meeting on that tomorrow, I think, with planning to talk a little bit more, since the project scope is expanded, on whether or not it may be better qualified as a LAP project for construction funding. So I don't know. Obviously, the negative to that is it'll impact the construction schedule because there are more steps that you have to go through. It wouldn't change anything we've done to date, but the original project schedule, I think, completing in 2026 would probably get pushed back a year or more if we were to look at doing some type of cost share project to help extend the 2021 transportation bonds for other uses. So we're going to have that conversation and see how that pans out, and if it looks like something that's a viable alternative, we can certainly bring that to you as something to consider.
With that, sort of bring a list of kind of what other projects were in the potential queue for funding from the bond that we can sort of balance out and reevaluate again.
Council's going to have that conversation about all of the bonds as we look at the inflation, and everybody kind of had in their mind the list of projects that we might get due with those funds. And, you know, as the prices go up, that list gets narrower and narrower. So there'll have to be some prioritization or funding by other means, you know, to help with the inflationary costs. But it definitely will limit what can be done with those funds. So we'll just have to look at the different options that we have.
We do have a list that we brought forward. It was a list that things were added to the 13 bond wish list, and then we knew we weren't going to have enough funding for that. So those have been moved over
into the list as well. Some of them have been started, like you've heard Mr. Johnson mentioned the 3 small sidewalk connector projects. That was a priority of council, so they were moved on over. So we'll bring you that list of what's been moved over, and then the Jones Sausage construction, and then from there, it would just, council would have to discuss anything else they want to add.
Yeah, I think it'd be good for a future work session, just to get a feel for what's been moved over and or being quite as far as we thought, which is the nature of where we are. Right. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I know that lap funding would sure be great assistance on Jones Sausage Road, but it's already planned with the projected schedule now would be spring of 2026. I'd hate to see that thing have to go another 1 or 2 years. I mean, really, I know lap funding could be a significant help with the cost, but to delay that project another 1 or 2 years, I think it'll be 6 years, could be 5 to 6 years out.
I think our first exercise, Mr. Singleton, is overlay the calendars of what happens, and if any parts of the application process and approval process could be simultaneously with that time that it's already going to take for us to finish the plans. If we think there's a reasonable way that we could entertain applying but not stretch the project out, then we'll be bringing that back for council to consider.
Okay, Mr. Johnson, you'll probably be glad to hear that that's about all the questions, and as far as I know, we don't need your presence anymore. I'm not sure about that. I think not.
Thank you.
Okay, yes, sir. Thank you. All right, so we are now, continue.
Yeah, I know one of the things we were going to talk about is the council dashboard. John worked with IT, but are we going to save that for another time? Because
We'll just quickly check in if it's okay. We sent an email last week with links to a revised SharePoint page for the council. If you've not already taken a look at that, please do and let us know if you've got any questions. But we're trying to set that up so it's an easy to access and use repository. Hopefully you got the list of files of things that we promised to send you from last week's meeting and could access those. If you haven't gotten to that or had any trouble with it, just let me know. Myself or Eric are willing to set up time to work with you on that. But due to the hour, we won't go through demoing that or anything tonight. But we're here to help you with that, and do just want to make sure that everybody's comfortable using that as a way for us to send you follow-up information after meetings.
The link works, I know, John. We tested it the other day.
Yes, sir.
And it's fine. Yeah, thank you.
The only other thing I would mention real quick, and I sent the email out, is there was a question by a resident about EV, electric vehicle charging stations, either on this campus or somewhere, having more throughout town, government, public finance. We are checking with Duke, the project manager. We were slated to get a couple here on this campus. We're going to find out kind of where that project stands. But we have not heard from them yet, but John's working on
We actually did just get a response back late today that we are still in pending approval mode, and they are overwhelmed with the project. They're trying to bring on staff to help with it, but we haven't gotten anything more firm than the last update, which I think we asked for back in March when Mr. Singleton made an inquiry on the status of that. So it was exciting to think we were getting those installed, but we don't know now where that will move forward.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
That's it.
Thanks, sure. And Ms. Jones, anything now? I know we have a closed session, right?
No report this evening.
Okay. You did a lot of reporting on some other matters earlier on. Thank you very much. Okay, council. Council reports. We'll go around. I'll start with Mr. Singleton.
I just want to, I sent staff a note, email thanking everyone for their hard work and their time on the July 3rd celebration, and we'll follow up with that. The weather broke right for us, well attended, and as always, a wonderful event. So thumbs up to everyone who was involved in it. It takes a lot of time and planning and preparation, and a lot of sweat on this weekend, as hot as it was. But anyway, greatly appreciated.
Okay, Ms. Behringer?
Just a couple of things. That utility line is still hanging down in front of 108 West Garner Road. It's been over a month. Can we
Yeah.
call them again?
Yeah. Me and Mr. Beasley were talking about it a week ago, and he's on. But I'll just relay what he said. He's reported it to AT&T and to Spectrum. Nobody's come out to do anything with it, so we'll just see if there's any other options.
Aggravating them until they don't want to hear us anymore.
Mhm.
But that's ridiculous. I know they've got a lot to do, but it's a very simple solution on their end if they just stop and do it.
Yeah, I imagine wherever the line went, they must not be out of service, so they be maybe complaining a little harder. So we'll have to find out.
Mine goes to rental property that's not occupied very often. So, the second thing is update on when the fence, where the tree fell and killed the fence on the railroad right away. When do we expect that will be able to be fixed?
I don't have a timeline. I know Public Works is working on it, but I don't have the exact timeline on that.
We'll follow up on that.
Last thing is just information. We have a sewer problem on Penny Street about a third of the way down, and it keeps recurring. That's a City of Raleigh issue, but who can I contact? The last weekend it was just pouring for hours and hours and hours, and it took them a couple. Happens over and over and over again in the same location. My uneducated guess is that the pipes need replacing, and they're not being replaced.
We'll
get
forward that
engineering
contact
staff, yeah.
information to you. We've got a phone number for those, and we'll send that to you.
We had sewer smell in our house again a couple of years ago. We had it several times, and we talked to the City of Raleigh, and that was our imagination. And then in 6 lay pipes on Garner Road were broken, and they replaced them, and that was fine for them at that time frame. But this is happening over and over and over again down the street from me. And it's not in my front yard. I feel bad for the people that it is in their front yard, but it's ridiculous that it keeps going on and not being dealt with. That's all.
Reports?
Nothing other, just to commend staff again on the July 3rd celebration. It was a nervous weather day, but you guys stuck to it and got lucky because it was hit or miss all day. So, but it was a good event. And
Councilmember Singleton was talking about sweat. I thought he meant us deciding whether to cancel or not at 10 o'clock that morning.
How about the heat?
And I did hear from some folks at the Wake EMS out there. It helped some people with heat exhaustion and stuff. So just, again, I'm glad and I appreciate everyone's hard work. That's all.
Okay, Mr. Matthews.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. It was a great event, and one thing I noticed that I stayed kind of late letting the traffic get in. I'm a people watcher, and it showed me some strong leadership with the staff when Assistant Town Manager John comes by me with a plastic bag and a garbage picker-upper. He and a lot of other key staff people were out there working late, helping pick up trash, and that's strong leadership. Don't think it don't go unnoticed, at least by me, and probably a whole lot of other people. You lead by example. So one thing I learned in my 20 and a half years in the military, if you're a good leader, the people will follow you, and you'll command a whole lot more respect. So I noticed that, and I just want to share that tonight. It's the first time I've seen that happen. And outstanding job. Makes good leaders out of you. And,
I was going to help too, but he took the last picker stick.
I literally did. So Rodney went and
we didn't want to fight over
do
it.
something else because
So
I
I
literally
went to
grabbed
help
the last
pick up
trash
cones
grabber.
and
Yep.
Rodney had
check in at the command post and stuff like that.
Rodney had to get his fan. I don't know what that was all about. But great job, team. And it was a team effort, and congratulations.
Mr. Manager, I'm pretty sure council would approve the purchase of more of those trash grabbers so that Mr. Matthews can have one next year. No problem there.
I don't mind a bit in the world.
If you want to go there, you'll probably get 5 more for the council members, huh? No. Mr. Vance, anything?
I would like to say you can order 4 grabbers.
Got it.
4?
It's just 4.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
So you're not going to help us?
Just order 4.
Okay.
I'd like to echo what has been said already. Great job, everyone. It was a great event, good time. Fireworks were great. The vendors were great. I had a good time, and glad everything ended safely. Yes.
I may, Mr. Mayor, add one more thing.
Go right ahead.
Every year, and my husband says the same thing, he is just amazed at how well the traffic is, the police organize the traffic flow. We get out there and it moves, and we leave, we get out. Yes, we have to wait a little bit, but we used to live by Walnut Creek, and that was a nightmare. And so what these guys do out there is just amazing, year after year.
Okay, thank you, yeah. And just I'm sure the manager will, and assistant managers will pass along to our department directors and all the people involved that we thank them for their efforts and extra efforts in making this another good event that the town could be proud of, I believe. So thank you all. With that, I believe we need one closed session under General Statutes 143, 318, 11A5.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, because of the hour tonight, we actually notified the folks that were going to join us for that it was probably too late to start that discussion. So if council's willing to, we will push that. We may need to ask if there's a way to have a special meeting ahead of the meeting on the 19th, possibly. We'll coordinate schedules with that and just see if there is, but we felt like it was probably too late to start the discussion tonight.
Okay, that's probably a good call. All right, thank you very much. So we don't have any other closed sessions do we, Madam Attorney? Okay. All right, well, I'm down to the area that says adjourn, so I'd entertain a motion for adjournment, council.
Second.
Okay. All in favor, please vote aye.
Aye.
Aye. And there is no opposition, so I declare that this meeting of the Garner Town Council is adjourned. See you all at the second meeting in this month.